Rebbe Noson, follower of Rebbe Nachman of Breslov. Likutey Halakhot. On Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim. Laws of the Priestly Blessing. Law 1. The blessing is recited only in the holy tongue, standing with hands outstretched and out loud. The blessings are given to the priests, for they are the guardians of the covenant. As written, they will teach your laws to Jacob, and they guard your covenant. Deuteronomy 33, 9-10. The Levites did not stray after the golden calf, which corresponded to a blemish of the covenant, as our sages said. The Israelites worshipped idolatry only in order to rationalize public lewdness. Sanhedrin 63b. All passions, especially sexual passion, which is the all-embracing evil of all passions, came about due to the breaking of the vessel of kindness, which gave rise to the passions that come from fallen loves. The priest corresponds to the man of kindness, who corresponds to the perfection of higher loves. As the Rebbe said on the verse, "Disgrace has broken my heart," Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 34. Since the priests are in the category of the rectification of the covenant, they are thereby able to evoke blessings, for their vessels are perfect. This contrasts with Bilam, who wanted to evoke a curse through a damaged vessel, since he was so sunken into this passion, as the Rebbe said on the verse, "When evildoers approach me," Psalms 27:2. Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 36. That is why Bilam was killed specifically by Pinchas, for Pinchas corresponded to the rectification of the covenant, which is why he attained priesthood, by his zealousness for the blemish of the covenant. Thus, specifically he killed Bilam, who was his complete opposite. This is why our sages instituted the priestly blessing in prayer, for prayer is also a rectification of the covenant, corresponding to the 18 blessings, as the Rebbe said several times, Likutey Moharan, Part 2, 83. That is why the blessing must be only in the holy tongue, for the guarding of the covenant is dependent upon the perfection of the holy tongue. For sexual passion, which is the all-embracing evil of the 70 languages, as the Rebbe said, Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 19, is subdued by the holy tongue. That is why the blessing is said out loud, for this corresponds to a rectification of knowledge, which is a rectification of the covenant, as the Rebbe said, Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 20. For the same reason we recite the Haggadah of Pesach out loud, for the Haggadah is a rectification of the covenant. And the blessing is said standing, which corresponds to masculinity, in contrast to Bilam, who fell, since he was uncircumcised, as Rashi comments, Numbers 24:4. This is how our sages derived from the verse, "Thus shall you bless there," that the blessing must be in the holy tongue Sotah 38a. For the numerical value of the word for thus corresponds to the Shekhinah, which corresponds to the perfection of the holy tongue. And the essence of the priestly blessing is to rectify the vessel of the Jewish people through the rectification of the covenant, so that they will be worthy to receive the blessings. This is why it is written, "They shall place my name on the Israelites." Numbers 6:27. For the name is the soul and the vessel of the life force. As the Rebbe mentions, Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 56, and the priests, with their blessing, perfect the vessel of the Jewish people, which is the name and the soul, corresponding to, "They shall place my name, then I shall bless them," for a blessing will automatically come upon them by virtue of their being vessels worthy to receive it. This is, "May God bless you with money and protect you from harm." Numbers Rabbah 11:5. Money protects the soul. As the Rebbe says, Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 59, and thus bless you with money and protect you from harm. All this is dependent upon the guarding of the covenant, for by guarding the covenant one attains wealth, which protects the soul. Then, may God shine his countenance upon you. This is the shining countenance that is brought about by guarding the covenant, as the Rebbe says, Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 23. Furthermore, may God shine His countenance upon you, specifically, His countenance to you, meaning that your own countenance will become so transparent that God's countenance will shine in you and through you, as the Rebbe said, Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 19. This is, may God favor you with His countenance, which corresponds to the rectification of the passion of eating, through which one attains favor, as in, shall I not show favor to the Jewish people for meticulously reciting a blessing after meals for small amounts? Brachot, 60b, as the Rebbe said, Likutey Moharan, Part 147. For by guarding the covenant, which is attained by the perfection of the holy tongue, one is able to reach a level at which all of one's eating will be from the shining of the light of the power of creation. As the Rebbe said, Likutey Moharan, Part 119, which is the rectification of eating. This is, may He grant you peace, for through all the above, one attains peace. By guarding the covenant, one attains peace, as in, I hereby grant him my covenant of peace. Numbers 25:12. In contrast to the disgrace that comes upon the one who blemishes the covenant, as in, disgrace has broken my heart. Similarly, through breaking the passion for eating, one attains peace. As the Rebbe says, Likutey Moharan, Part 139. This is why outside of the land of Israel we recite the priestly blessing only on the festivals, for we are subjugated to the rulers of the 70 nations and are powerless to overcome them through the priestly blessing, which corresponds to the perfection of the holy tongue. On the festival, however, when we rectify the holy Malkut and subdue the evil Malkut of the nations, as the Rebbe said, Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 135, the holy tongue, corresponding to the holy Malchut, has the power to subdue the evil of the 70 nations, which is why we recite the priestly blessing on the festival. This is why we recite in the Kiddush of the festival, who chose us from among all nations and exalted us above all languages. Specifically, on the festival are we exalted above all languages. For the holy tongue, corresponding to the holy Malkut, is then exalted, while the 70 languages, the Malkut of evil, is subdued and falls. Thus we do not recite the priestly blessing on Shabbat, even though the sanctity of the Shabbat is very exalted, but rather, on the contrary, specifically because of that, we do not recite it. The perfection of the holy tongue is through translation, the Targum, by elevating the good within it. Thus, on the festival, when the nations still have some rule and power, though we subdue them through the sanctity of the festival, the perfection of the holy tongue has meaning, and that is why we recite the priestly blessing. But on Shabbat, there is a complete eradication and cessation of evil. For the good of the Targum is elevated into the holy tongue, and evil ceases, and this takes place before the onset of Shabbat by washing ourselves with hot water. Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 19. On Shabbat itself, though, this is already irrelevant, since the Shabbat is entirely holy, and it is irrelevant to even mention the evil of the 70 nations at all. Thus, we do not recite the priestly blessing on Shabbat, for subduing the evil of the nations is irrelevant, since it was already eradicated before the Shabbat, and Shabbat itself is complete cessation. Yet, we do not mention in the Shabbat Kiddush, or prayers, who chose us and exalted us from all languages, as we say on the festival, for Shabbat is exalted even above this. Thus, the sanctity of the festival is dependent upon the Jewish people who consecrate the new moon. For since the 70 nations, the realm of evil, still have some power over it, we therefore must do some act to consecrate it. This act is mainly dependent upon speech in our we declaring consecrated, consecrated. Yerushalmi, Rosh Hashanah 3:1. Speech corresponds to the holy tongue, through which we evoke sanctity into the festival and subdue the evil of the nations. The Shabbat, though, does not need this, for the Shabbat is fixed and evil is completely eradicated on it. We do not need to consecrate it, since it is consecrated on its own. This is why we pray regarding a dream during the priestly blessing, for the interpretation of a dream is dependent upon the holy tongue, through the perfection of which one is able to interpret dreams, as the Rebbe writes there, Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 19. Thus, during the priestly blessing, which corresponds to the perfection of the holy tongue, we pray regarding dreams, to transform them into good through the priests, for interpretation is dependent upon them. Related to earlier. This is why the priestly blessing must be recited with the hands outstretched, for its purpose is to subdue the evil of the nations, who embody all the passions, which correspond to the power of imagination in the heart, which desires fulfillment of all passions, as the Rebbe says, Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 54. Subduing the passions thus subdues the melancholic spirit that is caused by the passions of the nations, who correspond to the dark countenance, which is sadness and melancholy. This is the meaning of our sages' teaching, because he will see you and rejoice in his heart. Aaron attained the priesthood. Shabbat 139a. Through the rejoicing of the heart, which subdues the power of imagination in the heart, the fallen loves, which correspond to the spirit of melancholy, as the Rebbe says there, that through rejoice in all your endeavors, one subdues the power of imagination. One attains priesthood, the priest, the man of kindness, who corresponds to the perfection of the sublime loves. This verse refers to Aaron's not being jealous of Moses' greatness, as written, he will come out to greet you and see you. Not only will Aaron not be actively jealous of Moses' greatness, which is the evil eye, begrudging the other person, but he will not even restrain the power of imagination in this regard. On the contrary, he will see you and rejoice in his heart, which is the opposite of the power of imagination. See all this well in Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 54. Thus, through the priestly blessing, which subdues the imagination in the heart, which corresponds to the melancholic spirit, one's limbs become hollowed, lightened, and then, let us lift our hearts to our hands, to God in heaven. Lamentations 3:41. And when I lift my hand to heaven. Deuteronomy 32:40. Which corresponds to the raising of the hands for the priestly blessing. See Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 56. Law 2. Based upon the lesson in Likutey Halakhot, Part 2, 2. See there the entire lesson well, how through Halakhot, which correspond to thanksgiving, which corresponds to the delight of the future world, the light of truth, which shines by means of three divine names, into speech is manifested, and speech is perfected. This perfection of speech is the holy tongue, which is connected to the Shabbat, as in, thus shall you bless, Numbers 6:23, in the holy tongue, Sotah 38a. This evokes the joy of Shabbat into the 6 weekdays, and then the absolute oneness is manifested, and everyone knows that all duality, which corresponds to the 6 weekdays, comes from the Absolute One. May his name be blessed. Section 1. This corresponds to the recitation of the priestly blessing in the holy tongue between the blessings of thanksgiving and peace at the end of the silent prayer. The priest is a man of kindness, corresponding to kindness, the divine loving kindness, which is why one thereby attains Halakhot. As written, they will teach your laws to Jacob, Deuteronomy 33:10, and he shall go to the priest or to the judge, there, 17:9, to inquire of them about the law. For the laws were given to the priests, for they correspond to loving kindness, since the Halakhot correspond to loving kindness, as explained in the lesson. Through this, one attains truth. As written, your Urim v'Tumim will be with a man of loving kindness. There, 33:8, meaning that the priest attains truth through the Halakhot, which correspond to loving kindness. This is why the priest attains the perfection of speech, as in, he shall be your mouthpiece, Exodus 4:16, which refers to Aaron. And this is why the priestly blessing was given to the priest in the holy tongue, as in, "Thus shall you bless," in the holy tongue. For they attain the perfection of speech, which corresponds to, "Thus shall you bless," through the Halakhot. For it is through the Halakhot that they attain this. This is why the priestly blessing was instituted to be recited after the blessing of thanksgiving. For through thanksgiving, which corresponds to Halakhot, one attains the priestly blessing, which corresponds to the holy tongue. For this reason, the blessing must be with joy, as stated in the Halakha Orach Chaim 128:14-45. The priestly blessing, which corresponds to the holy tongue, is connected to the Shabbat, through which we evoke the joy of Shabbat into the 6 weekdays. And thus, immediately after reciting the priestly blessing, we recite "Grant peace," corresponding to peace and oneness, which are attained through the priestly blessing, which is the manifestation of absolute oneness that is manifested through the Shabbat. This is why the priest begins to move toward the front of the synagogue with the blessing for the temple service, since the essence of the priestly blessing is to rectify service, which corresponds to Metatron the servant. For through the priestly blessing, which corresponds to the holy tongue, we evoke the joy of the Shabbat into the 6 weekdays, which correspond to Metatron the servant. For this very reason, the priestly blessing is recited during the silent prayer. For the silent prayer is called service. As our sages said, the first 3 blessings are like a servant listing his master's praises. The middle blessings are like a servant asking for a gift from his master. Brachot 34a. Hence, a person during the silent prayer is like a servant, corresponding to Metatron, who embodies the 18 blessings of the silent prayer. And the joy of Shabbat must be evoked into Metatron the servant, as in, "Serve God with joy," Psalms 102, which is accomplished through the priestly blessing. So that is why the priests begin to move toward the front of the synagogue with the blessing for the temple service, to allude that the service is thereby rectified by the joy of the Shabbat. For the walking to give the priestly blessing is itself a blessing, since walking corresponds to Jewish law, for which reason the halakha is from the same root as walking, as explained in the lesson. Thus, the priests request the blessing while they are walking toward the front by saying, "May it be your will that this blessing, since the walking, which corresponds to the halakha, is propitious for blessing, since the essence of blessing comes through the halakha," as said. The walking toward giving the priestly blessing during the blessing for the temple service is thus an allusion for the rectification of the service, that is, Metatron the servant, through the joy of Shabbat that is evoked by the priestly blessing, as in, "Thus shall you bless," in the holy tongue. See there in the lesson. This corresponds to the 3 blessings of the priestly blessing, in which are 3 divine names which correspond to the 3 names of Imiti, as brought in Kabbalistic texts. But the essence of the priestly blessing is peace, the peace and absolute oneness that is manifested through the priestly blessing in the holy tongue, which is connected to the Shabbat, as explained in the lesson. Section 2. This corresponds to the Nefilat Apayim, lowering one's face, after the silent prayer, which is when the ultimate unification, the absolute oneness, is manifested. This lowering of the face represents our literally lowering ourselves to the lowest spiritual levels. See Shar HaKavanot, Nefilat Apayim 2, and is done only during the weekdays, which correspond to this world, during which we are unable to fully merge into the sanctity of the unification, the absolute oneness, other than by falling, by a descent for the purpose of ascent. As the Rebbe says elsewhere, Likutey Moharan, Part 2:12, see there well. In sum, one falls into very lowly places, and from there searches and seeks, where is the place of his glory, which is the ultimate ascent, since where is the most sublime holiness. This is the Nefilat Apayim. Specifically, during a fall and a descent, we attain the ultimate unification, corresponding to the ultimate ascent. This is because Ayeh, which is the most sublime holiness, corresponds to the absolute oneness that is totally beyond comprehension, which in turn corresponds to Ayeh, and this most sublime holiness can only be attained through a descent for the purpose of ascent. This is why we recite the confession prior to the Nefilat Apayim, for this lowering and descent, which is for the purpose of ascent, corresponds to repentance, as explained in the lesson. For the essence of repentance is when we seek and search where is the place of His glory. This is also why we recite the 13 attributes at this point, which are the 13 rectifications of the beard that come from the Orach Anpin, which corresponds to the Keter, which corresponds to Ayeh. See Sefer Halikutim on Genesis 1. This is why the Nefilat Apayim is only recited during weekdays and not on Shabbat and the festivals, for Shabbat and the festivals is the greatest time for the manifestation of the absolute oneness. We thus only need a descent for the purpose of ascent during the weekdays, which correspond to this world, to duality. The silent prayer itself of the weekdays corresponds to duality, for the 13 middle blessings are distinct from each other. Thus, when we seek to merge into the absolute oneness, we must first descend for the purpose of ascent, and only then does all duality merge into the absolute oneness, which corresponds to the Nefilat Apayim. On Shabbat, though, which corresponds to the future world, when the absolute oneness will be manifested, as in, on that day, God will be one, Zechariah 14:9, and when all of the middle blessings are merged into one, for we recite only one blessing, we therefore do not need any fall or descent, Nefilat Apayim. For the fall and descent is only for the purpose of ascent, that is, to the sanctity of the Shabbat, which corresponds to the absolute oneness, and Shabbat and the festivals do not need this. Similarly, on any day that has added sanctity, and any added sanctity comes from the Shabbat, which is the totality of sanctity, and since there is a manifestation of the sanctity of the Shabbat, we do not need any fall or descent. Thus, we do not recite the Nefilat Apayim on certain days during the year. Section 3. This corresponds to the Kedusha de Sidra that is recited in Uva Litzion in Aramaic, in Targum, in other words, that the Aramaic translation merges into holiness, for the duality merges into absolute oneness through the rectification of prayer. This corresponds to the Aramaic ascending and merging into the holy tongue. Targum corresponds to the tree of knowledge of good and evil, as the Rebbe says elsewhere, Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 19, which corresponds to Metatron, which corresponds to the 6 weekdays. This corresponds to the duality, for all duality corresponds to the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for sanctity itself is wholly good, holy one, and is not comprised of any differentiations. But as soon as there is some differentiation, evil has a place to attach itself to, which corresponds to the tree of knowledge of good and evil, as can be understood from Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 51. Hence, Targum, which corresponds to the tree of knowledge, corresponds to Metatron, to duality, to the 6 weekdays. Now, though, it is merged into holiness, into the holy tongue which is connected with Shabbat. So we recited the Kedusha in the holy tongue and then in Targum, merging the Targum into holiness. This corresponds to duality merging into absolute oneness, which is the quintessence of holiness. This is why our sages said, the world stands upon the Kedusha de Sidra, Sota 49a. For the world exists for the purpose of restoring everything to its source, for that is why it was created, and that is what sustains it. Thus our sages said that the world stands upon the Kedusha de Sidra, which was instituted to be recited in Aramaic, which corresponds to duality, which is merged into the absolute oneness, which sustains the world. For the continued existence of the world is an amazing phenomenon. How duality, the entire world, receives its existence from absolute oneness. That is why the world has no existence other than through the Kedusha de Sidra, which merges all duality into the absolute oneness upon which the world stands. Section 4. This corresponds to the Song of the Day, which we recite after the Kedusha de Sidra, in which we mention Shabbat every day, as in, "Today is the first day of Shabbat." This is in order to evoke the joy of Shabbat into the 6 weekdays, which itself corresponds to the Song of the Day that we recite. The essence of all songs are only on Shabbat, which corresponds to the future world that will be roused by the Song of the Future. All songs of the 6 weekdays which correspond to this world are only the song and joy that is evoked from the Shabbat into the weekdays. That is why we first declare, "Today is the first day of the Shabbat," and only then recite the song, for the song is evoked from the joy of Shabbat into the weekdays. This is also corresponds to the incense service that we recite after prayers, corresponding to joy, as written, "Incense rejoices the heart." Proverbs 27:9. For we can only attain joy today by evoking it from the joy of the Shabbat into the weekdays. Then we conclude with Halakhot and peace, as in, whoever studies Halakhot every day. Nida 73a. For this is the summation of it all. For all the above is brought about through the Halakhot, through which one attains peace, which corresponds to the absolute oneness that is manifested. Blessed be God forever. Amen and amen. Section 5. This corresponds to the Kedusha de Sidra that we recite on Motzei Shabbat. Immediately after the Shabbat and the onset of the 6 weekdays, we recite the Kedusha de Sidra that was instituted in the Holy Tongue and in Aramaic in order to evoke the sanctity of the Shabbat into the weekdays by merging the Targum into the Holy Tongue, which is connected to Shabbat. This is why we do not recite the Kedusha de Sidra on Shabbat and festival morning, but only in the afternoon, for they do not need to have sanctity evoked upon them, for they are inherently sacred, and the sanctity of Shabbat manifests on the festival as well. Only in the afternoon prayer do we recite the Kedusha de Sidra, for the weekdays are soon approaching, and the afternoon prayer is connected to the following day regarding Tachanun, so we recite it at this time. Law 3. Section 1. Based on the lesson in Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 31. See there the entire lesson well. In sum, charity corresponds to the Galgalim, orbits of the celestial bodies, and charity is only perfected through faith, which is the source of blessings. Thus, though there should be 19 blessings connected to charity, corresponding to the 7 planets and the 12 constellations of the Galgalim, our sages said, "One who gives charity is blessed with 6 blessings, and the one who appeases the poor is blessed with 11 Bhavabhatra, 9b, so there are blessings missing." This is because charity is only perfected through faith, and faith is dependent upon the covenant, and guarding the covenant is on 2 levels, the angel of God and Zvat. Whoever attains the guarding of the covenant brings about a manifestation of loving kindness, which is love, yearning and longing for God. This brings about the creation of souls and the forming of vowels for the letters. In other words, the letters are formed to receive good, but yearning and longing along is not sufficient. One must express one's longing with one's mouth so that the soul comes out of potential into actuality. This corresponds to the reincarnation of souls. This corresponds to the conjugation of souls, for an arousal from below through yearning for something sacred creates a female soul, and that sacredness then yearns in return to the one who yearned for it, which corresponds to the arousal of the male, which creates a male soul. Then, when a person is soulful, all his eating and his meals correspond to the showbread, and all the non-Jews then toil for his sustenance. The countenance is then manifested, corresponding to the light of the sun, as in, your master will no longer be hidden. Isaiah 30:20. For God's countenance has been manifested, since their shadow is gone. Study there these very sublime concepts. Section 2. This corresponds to the priestly blessing. The priest is known as a man of loving kindness. See Shar Ma'amarei Razal, Avot. 11b. This corresponds to the loving kindness that is manifested at the tip of the male organ, the covenant of peace, as in, I hereby grant to him my covenant of peace, and it shall be for him. An eternal covenant of priesthood. Numbers 25:12. The priesthood, which corresponds to the loving kindness, is manifested through the guarding of the covenant. For the priests correspond to the guarding of the covenant, as written, they guarded your words and protected your covenant. Deuteronomy 33:9. Thus, the priest corresponds to desire and yearning. For the entire sacrificial service is done by the priest, and desire is mentioned regarding all sacrifices, as written, you shall offer it for your desire, Leviticus 19:5, and similarly regarding all sacrificial services. This is because specifically the priest is able to offer the sacrifices for desire, since the priest himself corresponds to desire, since he corresponds to loving kindness and love, which corresponds to yearning and desire, as said. Thus, the master who resembles an angel of God of hosts, meaning that he guards the covenant, such that loving kindness, which is love, yearning, and longing, is thereby manifested through him. As explained well in the lesson, this master is called a priest, as stated in the verse, for the lips of the priest will guard knowledge, and they will seek Torah from him, mouth, for he is an angel of God of hosts. Malachi 2:7. Our sages commented on this verse. If the master resembles an angel of God of hosts, then seek Torah from his mouth. Moed Katan 17a. Which the Rebbe explains in this lesson to mean that when the master resembles an angel of God of hosts, which means guarding the covenant on both levels, then loving kindness is manifested, which is yearning and longing. These yearnings must be expressed orally, which creates vowels for the letters of the Torah, thus forming the Torah letters for the good, to bring about good things. This is, they will seek Torah from his mouth, meaning that the letters of the Torah seek to be formed through this master who resembles an angel of God of hosts, as explained in the lesson. This master is called a priest, for the priest corresponds to a master, since the priest guards the covenant. Thus, the priest is commanded with extra sanctity regarding the covenant, more than the rest of the Jewish people, as written, they shall be holy. They shall not marry a prostitute or a divorcee. Leviticus 21:6-7. The priest thus corresponds to loving kindness, since loving kindness is manifested through the covenant, as well as to desire and yearning, as well as to the master. This is why it is written regarding the priests, your Urim ve-Tumim will be with the man of loving kindness, for they guarded your word and protected your covenant. They will teach your laws to Jacob and your Torah to Israel. Deuteronomy 33:8-9. The priest, who is your man of loving kindness, who attains this by guarding the covenant, as in, they guarded your word and protected your covenant, will teach your laws to Jacob and your Torah to Israel, for he is certainly worthy to teach law and Torah to Israel, for they will seek Torah from his mouth, since the letters of the Torah seek to be formed through the priestly man of loving kindness who corresponds to the master, as said. And since the priest who corresponds to the master teaches Torah to Israel, he thereby forms the letters of the Torah for the good, since he corresponds to loving kindness by means of the covenant, and is thus certainly worthy to teach Torah and law to Israel. Hence, the priest corresponds to the covenant, to loving kindness. This is why all blessings come through the priest, for all blessings are perfected by him, since all blessings are lacking and have no perfection without faith, and faith is dependent upon the guarding of the covenant, through which loving kindness, which is desire and yearning for God, is manifested, through which the letters of the Torah are formed for the good, through which blessings are perfected. All blessings come in this way, through holy yearning that gives form to the letters of the Torah that are the underlying cause of all things in the world. They are given form for the good and for blessing, which is the source of blessing. For all blessings come from the Torah, which is the source of the vitality present in all things in the world. But the letters of the Torah are only able to act according to how they are formed, whether through yearning for good or the opposite, as explained in the lesson. See there. Hence, all blessings come through holy yearnings, which is why specifically through the loving kindness that is manifested through the guarding of the covenant, which corresponds to holy desire and yearnings, are all blessings perfected, for their perfection is dependent upon the guarding of the covenant through which loving kindness is manifested. With this, the concepts discussed in the lesson loving kindness, which is holy yearnings, and the perfection of blessings are well connected. Understand this. This corresponds to the priestly blessing, specifically, the priestly man of loving kindness, by corresponding to the covenant, is able to evoke blessings upon Israel, for the perfection of all blessings comes through him. This is, may God bless you with money. It is explained at the end of the lesson that when a person becomes soulful through loving kindness and desire, corresponding to holy yearnings, and his eating and sustenance are then in the category of showbread. Then all the non-Jews toil for his sustenance, since their shadow is gone. For the non-Jews correspond to the shadow that conceals the light of the sun, thus revealing the light of the sun to shine, thus fulfilling the verse, "Your eyes will see your master." This is then, may God bless you with money. Numbers Rabbah 11:5. For through the priest corresponding to loving kindness, he is able to evoke blessings upon Israel, thus evoking money and great sustenance, corresponding to the showbread, and everyone toils for his sustenance. This is, guard you from harm, as in, their shadow is gone. For the non-Jews, who are the shadow that covers the light of the sun, are themselves the harmful ones. That is why, regarding today, when they conceal the sun, it is said, by day the sun will not strike you, and by night the moon. God will guard you. Psalms 121:6. For today we need to be guarded from the sun and the moon, that they not cause harm, since the non-Jews, who are harmful ones, are attached to them. Thus, through the priest who is a man of loving kindness, who evokes sustenance as the showbread, thus revealing the sun, since their shadow is gone, and the non-Jews who are attached to the sun and conceal its light are subdued and eradicated. We are guarded from the harmful ones, the non-Jews. This is why the priest, who is the man of loving kindness, blesses, may God bless you with money and guard you from the harmful ones. This is, may God shine his countenance upon you, meaning that the countenance should be manifested so that there will be sustenance, as the showbread, through the manifestation of God's countenance, which corresponds to, your master will no longer be concealed, as stated in the lesson. Section 3. And the priestly blessing was instituted mainly in the repetition of the silent prayer, since the silent prayer that is composed of the 18 blessings also corresponds to the above, for it corresponds to the covenant, since the 18 blessings correspond to tzaddik, life of the worlds. That is why tzaddikim are able to attain prayer, for the essence of prayer is to evoke an abundance of good and blessing upon the Jewish people, and the perfection of blessings are through faith. Thus, prayer corresponds to faith, as written, his hands were faith, Exodus 17:12, translated by the Targum as, in, his hands were stretched out in prayer, as the Rebbe cites elsewhere, see Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 7. Faith, in turn, is dependent upon the covenant, which corresponds to the 18 blessings of prayer, which corresponds to the tzaddik, as said. For this reason, there are 18 blessings, besides the blessing regarding the heretics, for the essence of faith corresponds to the blessing regarding the heretics. We pray that God will uproot the heretics and apostates, so that faith will be manifested in the world. Thus, the essence of prayer is dependent upon the blessing regarding the heretics. As our sages said, if the prayer leader skips any of the blessings, he is not dismissed, except for the blessing regarding heretics, Brachot 29a. So the 18 blessings of the silent prayer are besides the blessing regarding the heretics, for through the 18 blessings which correspond to the guarding of the covenant, to the tzaddik, faith is manifested and strengthened, for the essence of faith is through the guarding of the covenant, when all heretics and apostates are subdued, which is the essence of the blessing regarding the heretics. Then, through the 18 blessings and the blessing regarding the heretics, which correspond to the covenant and the perfection of faith, which is dependent upon the covenant, all blessings are perfected. Thus, the 18 blessings with the blessing regarding the heretics are together 19 blessings. This corresponds to the perfection of all blessings, which corresponds to the 12 constellations and the 7 planets, which are together 19. For the perfection of blessings is when they are 19, corresponding to the constellations and the planets, as can be understood from the beginning of the lesson, where the Rebbe says, "And the fact that there are only 17 blessings, while there should be 7 plus 12, 19 blessings, points that charity is only perfected through faith. Thus, through prayer, which corresponds to faith, which is manifested through the covenant, all blessings are perfected, and then they are 19. That is why the silent prayer is 19 blessings in all." Section 4. Then loving kindness is manifested love, desire, and holy yearning for God, which must be expressed orally. This is the essence of prayer, which is a service of the heart, corresponding to cleaving, yearning, and longing. Prayer must be expressed orally in order to express the longing with one's mouth, so that the soul is expressed from potential to actuality, for which the prayer liturgy was instituted, as the Rebbe says there. Also there in the middle of the lesson, the Rebbe says that this yearning and longing brings about conjugation, for yearning for something holy is an arousal from below that creates a female soul, and the object of one's holy yearning in turn yearns for the one who yearned for it, which is a male arousal that creates a male soul. This is why the priestly blessing is during the prayer, and the priests should not step up until the prayer leader calls for them, which our sages derived from the verse. Say to them they must be called upon, and only then do they step up to bless the Jewish people. Furthermore, the priestly blessing must be read out for them word for word, which is also derived from this same verse. See Orach Chaim 128:13. This is because prayer, which corresponds to cleaving, longing, and holy yearning, corresponds to an arousal from below. For prayer corresponds to the Malkut, which corresponds to an arousal from below, the female arousal, and this arousal from below must precede the arousal from above, for above is aroused from below. The priest in relation to the Jewish people corresponds to a male, to an arousal from above, for the priest corresponds to the master and tzaddik of the generation, who himself corresponds to a male in relation to the Jewish people, who correspond to the female. Thus, the loving kindness of the priest, which is the source of all blessings, can only be aroused to evoke blessing during prayer by being called upon, for there must first be an arousal from below. This is why during prayer, which corresponds to holy yearning, the yearning of this prayer, which corresponds to the arousal of the female, the priestly man of loving kindness is aroused, which corresponds to an arousal of the male, an arousal from above. And he must be called upon orally, as written, "Say to them," for the expression of the soul from potential to actuality is through the mouth, as in, "My soul went out as he spoke," Song of Songs 5:6. Thus, when the priest is called upon during prayer, the supernal loving kindness is aroused, as in an arousal from above, which corresponds to the priestly man of loving kindness. Only then does the priest step up to bless the Jewish people, for that is what perfects all blessings. And for the same reason, the priestly blessings are read out to the priest word by word, for the priest who corresponds to an arousal from above is only aroused from an arousal from below. So the prayer leader must read the blessings out to him word by word. Only then is the priest, corresponding to the supernal loving kindness, the arousal from above, aroused to bless the Jewish people. This is why it is customary to bless someone about to embark on a journey with the priestly blessing. For the priestly blessing rectifies the path from all suffering and pain that may befall a person along the way. This is because all suffering that befalls a person on a journey is caused by the constellations, which is all dependent upon the covenant, as explained well in the lesson. Thus, the priestly blessing, which corresponds to the loving kindness that is manifested through the covenant, through which all blessings, which correspond to the constellations, are perfected through faith, which is supported by the covenant. The person is spared from all pain and suffering along the way, for the paths have been rectified by the covenant, which corresponds to the priestly blessing. Law 4. Based on the lesson in Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 22. See there the entire lesson from beginning to end. We have already spoken about this lesson several times. Section 1. This corresponds to the raising of the hands for the priestly blessing. By so doing, the priests evoke the seal of the hands, which corresponds to faith, as in Aaron raised his hands toward the people and blessed them, Leviticus 9:22. It is explained in this lesson that in order to attain the seal of the hands, one must fill the hands with the 7 shepherds, as in, "For 7 days shall you fill their hands," Exodus 29:29. Specifically, the priests attain this. For this verse, "for 7 days," refers to the initiation of the priests, which was to rectify the sin of the golden calf, which was idolatry, a blemish of the covenant, the power of which was connected specifically with the hands by Aaron's receiving the gold from their hands. As written, "He received it from their hands and formed it a sculpting tool," Exodus 32:4, as explained in the lesson. Then, after God was appeased and wanted to forgive and rectify the sin of idolatry, he commanded to construct a sanctuary. "For 7 days shall you fill their hands," was part of the initiation procedure for the sanctuary and the priests, and corresponds to the rectification of the seal of the hands, which corresponds to the faith that is received from the shepherds, which the priests attain. Hence, the priests attain the seal of the hands, which corresponds to faith, to Jerusalem, the faithful city. This is why the priestly service is specifically in Jerusalem, for the wholeness and construction of Jerusalem, which corresponds to faith, comes through the priests who attain the seal of the hands, which is faith. Section 2. This is why the priestly blessing is recited at the end of the prayer, during the blessing for peace. As explained in the lesson, it is impossible to be able to approach the 7 shepherds who evoke and fill the seal of the hands, through whom faith is evoked, other than with holy audacity. And holy audacity can only be attained through joy, which is attained through "we shall do and hear," through Torah and prayer, which correspond to the exoteric and the esoteric. Prayer corresponds to the esoteric, to hear, to cleaving and surrender to the infinite. One must constantly ascend from level to level, transforming hear into do, esoteric into exoteric, prayer into Torah. One then constantly reaches a higher level of hear. It is explained well in the lesson that the hear that corresponds to prayer corresponds to breshit, to awe, to a perfect saying, through which one can attain joy, for the perfection of joy is through prayer, which corresponds to complete awe. Through this joy, one attains holy audacity, through which one can break the audacity of the body and be able to approach one's own soul and the tzaddik of the generation, that the body be able to receive from the soul and the world at large to receive from the tzaddik all the insights and perceptions that the soul and the tzaddik of the generation constantly see and perceive. Faith, which corresponds to Jerusalem, the faithful city, is then perfected. This is why faith is called Jerusalem. The numerical value of the word for perfect awe, for its construction, is mainly through the soul, which is the numerical value of the word for awe, shame, a perfect saying, which is perfect awe. See there the entire lesson well. Section 3. Thus, at the conclusion of the prayer, and prayer corresponds to, here, to the esoteric, when we reach the blessings over the temple service and modem, gratitude. As a servant who has received a gift from his master, as our sages said, Brachot 34a, we then must strive to attain the here, to transform the here into do, which is to attain Jerusalem, Yira Shalom. This corresponds to the blessing for the temple service, which corresponds to awe, as we recite when the priests go forward for the priestly blessing. We will serve you there in awe, concluding the blessing with, you alone will we serve with awe. That is why the priests step forward for the priestly blessing at this point. The priestly blessing itself is recited just prior to the blessing for peace, which is also the conclusion of the priestly blessing. As written, may he grant you peace. This is because the essence of the priestly blessing is to evoke the seal of the hands, which corresponds to Jerusalem, the faithful city, which is attained through prayer, which corresponds to here, which is why the priestly blessing is recited specifically during prayer, specifically adjacent to the blessing for peace, which is the quintessence of the priestly blessing, grant you peace, which corresponds to the perfect saying. They step forward during the blessing for the temple service, which corresponds to awe, and then bless with shalom, corresponding to Yira Shalem, which corresponds to Jerusalem, the faithful city, which corresponds to the seal of the hands that the priests evoke specifically by raising their hands. Section 4. In fact, all of the above is one and the same, and interdependent. As explained in the lesson, one must receive perfect faith from the tzaddik of the generation, who is the totality of the 7 shepherds. And each individual must receive from his own soul all of the insights and perceptions that his soul perceives, so that the body will also know of it. All this is impossible to attain other than through holy audacity, which is attained through joy, which corresponds to do and hear. The perfection of joy, though, is the here, as explained there, and one must constantly ascend from level to level, transforming the here into do, so that one always attains a higher here, and so on, until one merges into the infinite. Then one attains joy, through which one attains audacity, through which one is able to receive the insights and perceptions that the soul perceives, and the world at large is able to receive from the tzaddik of the generation. Then one attains perfect faith, and the seal of the hands is perfected, as explained in the lesson. However, it seems at first glance that it is impossible to approach one's soul or the tzaddik of the generation other than through the highest level of do and hear, which is the merging into the infinite. If that is so, it is very perplexing, for certainly after one has attained such a high level of do and hear, which is the attainment of the esoteric, do, one has then already received many insights and perceptions from the soul for perceiving the here. The esoteric is itself surely an insight of the soul. So how is it possible to say that by attaining this here, one will attain the audacity to break the audacity of the body and be able to approach the soul and the tzaddik? After one has already attained such a high level of here, one has surely already broken the audacity of the body, for otherwise, how could one have attained such a level of here? But in fact, it is all intertwined. Surely this perception of here is itself the insight and perception that the body must receive from the soul, and the world at large from the tzaddik. For whatever the body and the world at large receive from the soul, and the tzaddik corresponds to here, to the esoteric, for it was initially hidden. However, a perception is considered here while it is still hidden from the person, for after one has perceived it, it is no longer considered here but do, for perceiving the here transforms the here into do, and one attains a higher here. The categories of here and do at each level correspond to the exoteric and esoteric, to Torah and prayer, through which one attains joy, which corresponds to holy audacity, through which one is able to receive all the insights and perceptions from the soul and the tzaddik, which itself corresponds to the perception of here. For example, for a simple person at a low level, his do will be Torah at a simple level, while his here will be some level only slightly higher than that, for he knows nothing yet about the path and strategies to serve God. All the paths and strategies are for him in the category of here, hidden from him, which corresponds to prayer, cleaving. In other words, he must pray profusely to God and surrender himself to him, secluding himself and pouring out his heart to God with appeasements and beseeching, which corresponds to here, which corresponds to prayer, which is his praying to God to show him the way and the strategy to serve him. Meanwhile, though, this path and strategy is concealed from him as here. Through this, the cleaving and the prayer itself, which corresponds to here, one attains joy, as in, eternal joy is on their heads. Isaiah 35:10. For the do becomes the here. Torah becomes prayer. By the Torah that one studies in a simple way at one's own level, and the prayer and hitbodedut, in which one pours out one's heart before God, to teach him the path and the strategy to serve him at a level that is yet hidden from him. Through this itself, one attains joy. And through this joy, one attains holy audacity, and the audacity of the body is broken, and one becomes able to receive insights and perceptions from one's soul and from the tzaddik of the generation. In other words, one receives from them the perception of here, that perception that is hidden from the person, and then, according to one's perception, faith will be perfected, which is the seal of the hands, which corresponds to Jerusalem, the faithful city, which corresponds to perfect awe that is attained through the here, which corresponds to awe, the perfect saying. For the perception of here itself corresponds to Jerusalem, the faithful city, which corresponds to the perfection of faith that is received from the tzaddik and the soul. Section 5. In sum, at every level, when one rises from do and hear to a higher do and hear, this itself corresponds to the perceptions and insights that are received from the soul and the tzaddik. This is achieved through the do and hear itself, that is, through the exoteric and the esoteric, through Torah and prayer, through the prayer and cleaving to God when the perception is still hidden. Through this itself, one attains joy, through which one attains holy audacity to break the audacity of the body and receive insights and perceptions from the soul and from the tzaddik, which is itself the perception of here, the esoteric. Then, when faith is perfected, as in Jerusalem, faithful city, which corresponds to the seal of the hands, the here is transformed into do, and then this here and esoteric perception is no longer considered here and esoteric, but do and exoteric. Then one attains a higher level of here, of esoteric, and then one again prays and beseeches God to show him this new esoteric perception, this new here, this hitbodedut. Prayer and cleaving are called here, which then breaks the audacity of the force of evil, and one then receives a higher insight from one's soul and from the tzaddik. This insight and perception is itself the perception of the higher here, and then Jerusalem, the faithful city, is perfected and constructed, and so on, from level to level. Section 6. This is because before one can ascend from one do and hear to a higher do and hear, one must first go through a descent for the purpose of ascent. This descent prior to ascent itself corresponds to the audacity of the body that is always trying to overwhelm when one attempts to rise from level to level. And the breaking of the audacity of the body, the audacity of the forces of evil, is through joy, for it is impossible to overpower it other than specifically through joy. This joy is attained through do and hear, through Torah and prayer, through the Torah that one studies, and the prayer and hitbodut, in which one pours out one's heart before God, that one be able to ascend from one level and reach a higher level. This is mainly accomplished through prayer and hitbodut, which is hear, which is the essence of the perfection of joy. For the essence of joy is attained through the hitbodut and prayer, through which one attains holy audacity to break the audacity of the body that is always seeking to overwhelm, which corresponds to a descent before the ascent. This is because through hitbodut and prayer, one is able to strengthen one's joy and gird oneself with great holy audacity and stubbornness until one breaks the audacity of the body, of the forces of evil, and transforms a descent into an ascent, thus attaining the perception of hear, of the esoteric for which one prayed. This itself corresponds to the perception and insight that the soul and the tzaddik shine into a person through which Jerusalem, the faithful city, is perfected. Section 7. Now, based on all this, we can understand well why the priestly blessing is recited at the end of the silent prayer in the last 3 blessings. Prayer corresponds to hear, in that we pray to God that we perceive the hear and the esoteric. For the essence of prayer is in order to attain soul healing and sustenance, as the Rebbe says, Likutey Moharan, Part 1, 14. Then, at the end of prayer, after the middle blessings and our being confident that God has heard our prayer and will fill our request, as we declare, "Blessed are you, who hears prayer," we then begin the last 3 blessings as a servant who has received a gift from his master. This is why we mention awe at this point, as in, "You alone will we serve with awe." For awe corresponds to the perfect saying that is attained through prayer when the construction of Jerusalem begins to be completed, which is the seal of the hands. That is why the priests step to the front of the synagogue at this point. Then we recite the modim, the prayer of gratitude, bowing with gratitude to God for all the miracles and wonders that He does for us every day and all the time, as we declare, "We thank you for your miracles that are with us every day and for your wonders." But the main gratitude is for the salvation of the soul, for the miracles and wonders and kindness that God does with each and every Jewish person every single day and every hour and time, causing things to happen for one's good at all times, such that one will ultimately reach one's eternal rectification, no matter what. And if one so desires, one is able to attain great spiritual levels anytime one desires to be roused to return to God. For God is always good to all, and His compassion is for all His creatures. As known, the true compassion and good is the eternal good, to be able to truly come close to God's service, and other than this, everything is worthless. Certainly, God's compassion is not mainly to just provide a person with sustenance and health and so on. For what use is all this if one does not come close to God? It is surely not considered good and compassion if one were given 1,000 rubles or more as a gift and then beaten and tortured bitterly for hundreds of years. And all the more so God, who knows the future, and that this entire world is worthless and empty, like a passing shadow, knows that there is no good of this world that can truly be considered good, and that the only good and compassionate thing is when some good and salvation regarding serving God comes out of it for a person. All of the good things, miracles and wonders that God does for us every day and at all times is only His thinking thoughts, so that no one will be lost. 2 Samuel 14:14. God changes His plans according to their deeds, Job 37:12, such that a person will attain what he does if he wants, and if not, he will at least not get completely lost. For God has given free choice to human beings, yet, our sages said, one's evil inclination overwhelms a person every day, and if God would not help a person, he would fall into his hands. Kiddushin 30b. Whoever enters into the service of God for a while can see wonders from afar, miracles and wonders that God does for each and every one of us, such that the sanctity of Israel will endure. In sum, our main gratitude to God, as we declare in the Modim prayer, is for the wondrous salvations of the soul that He does for us, the great and awesome miracles and wonders of every day and time and hour, such that we do not become distant from Him. And not only does He not distance us on account of our many sins, but in His abundant compassion also transforms the descent into an ascent and sins into merits, performing awesome miracles and wonders at all times, so that we are always able to move from darkness to great light. This corresponds to the miracles of Chanukah and Purim, which we mention in the Modim prayer. These miracles helped the Jewish people to subdue the Greeks and Haman, who were jealous of them and wanted to prevent them from serving God. Haman even wanted to completely wipe them out. But God, in His awesome compassion, transformed wailing to joy, turning things literally upside down. Not only were they unable to actualize their plans, but we even thereby attained 2 new holy festivals, Chanukah and Purim, during which we receive great and wondrous insights and observe new commandments as a result of these miracles, such as the lighting of the Chanukah candles and the reading of the Megillah. Hence, the descent the Jewish peoples being extremely downtrodden and depressed was transformed to its extreme opposite, from a descent to a great ascent, in that we attained such a great light, such holy commandments and festivals. The same is true of every individual and at all times. Every day and hour, evening, morning, and noon, God does for us true miracles and wonders, such that we do not completely fall by the wayside, which is what the forces of evil seek. On the contrary, in His awesome compassion, He constantly transforms the descent into a great ascent. Section 8. This is the essence of the Modim prayer and the bowing of the head for the Modim. Bowing and prostrating before God when one has been saved from spiritual distress, which is the true distress, is itself a descent that is transformed into an ascent. The descent corresponds to a fall, as in, "My legs nearly swayed," Psalms 73:2, and "For our soul has bowed to the dust, our belly has cleaved to the earth," there, 44:26. In such situations, we must lay ourselves out before God, bowing and prostrating, beseeching, praying and begging, as in, "Let him place his mouth to the dust, perhaps there is hope." Lamentations 3:29. Then, after one is firm in this, one is able to transform the descent into a great ascent, which corresponds to Modim, when we bow with gratitude, which alludes to the miracles and wonders that we had the privilege to be rescued from whatever it was, and to break the audacity of the body until we are able to then evoke the insight and perception of hear, which corresponds to perfect awe. We attain all this through the descent for the purpose of the ascent, which corresponds to bowing, for the descent is transformed into bowing and prostrating before God, at which time we receive a great light from the awesome lights that are evoked by the bowing during prayer, especially the bowing of the Modim. Hence, the Modim blessing and the bowing correspond to descent for the purpose of ascent, and the perception of the hear is perfected, which corresponds to perfect saying, Shalom, peace. Thus, the priests ascend to bless the Jewish people with peace at this point after the Modim blessing, for that is when we become able to receive the perception of the hear in perfection, which corresponds to perfect saying peace, which corresponds to the seal of the hand, to Jerusalem, faithful city. Thus, the raising of the hands for the priestly blessing corresponds to the seal of the hands, which corresponds to the faith that the Jewish people are able to receive through these hands, which is the essence of the blessing, as in a man of faith and abundant blessing. Proverbs 28:20, as the Rebbe says elsewhere, Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 24. This itself corresponds to the perfect saying, which corresponds to Jerusalem, faithful city, complete awe, which is why the greatest blessing is peace. This is, God grants strength to His people. God blesses His people with peace. Psalms 29. 1 through holy audacity, one attains peace, which corresponds to awe, peace, which corresponds to Jerusalem, faithful city, which is attained through holy audacity, which is the greatest blessing, as in the priestly blessing, the essence of which is peace, as in, God will bless His people with peace. Amen and amen. Law 5. Section 1. Based on the lesson in Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 34. See there the entire lesson. Prayer is explained there as binding the point which corresponds to a tzaddik rules to the heart. This is why we must speak out our hearts before God, expressing ourselves before Him to arouse our hearts to His service. We must also speak with others about awe of God, as well as speak with the tzaddik himself. All this in order to receive the holy point of light, which corresponds to a tzaddik rules, and to bind it to the heart. In order to shine, my mouth will speak wisdom, into my heart will speak understanding, so as to negate the disgrace of the heart, the foreskin of the heart, which is all the evil loves, the fallen loves. Holy love dwells near the point, for the light of loving kindness remains there. Through holy love, all disgraces of the heart are dissolved, for love conceals all transgressions. See all this there well. As explained there at the beginning, section 3, this corresponds to prayer, which is for the goal of evoking abundance through the vehicles of speech, as written, He should bless you as He spoke to you. Deuteronomy 1:11. The words of the tzaddik are certainly perfect and full, and are therefore able to evoke abundance for the Jewish people, which is why he is referred to by the vowel, the letter that means a full mouth, implying that his mouth is full and perfect. Each and every Jew possesses an aspect of a tzaddik rules, which corresponds to that full vowel. This is the meaning of the verse, I am Hashem, your God, who took you up out of the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide, and I will fill it. Psalms 81:11. This corresponds to the full vowel. The full vowel is represented by a dot and a line. The full vowel has collective and individual correspondences for the 10 Commandments with the tablets. See all this there well. Hence, the essence of prayer is based upon the good point that is to be found in every Jewish person, which corresponds to a tzaddik rules, as in, all of your people are tzaddikim, Isaiah 60:21. According to one's good point, one is able to evoke an abundance specifically through speech, as in, open your mouth wide, and I will fill it. The essence of dominion, as in, a tzaddik rules, is to illuminate and arouse the heart to God, as explained in the lesson. This is accomplished through the speech of prayer and hitbadadat, pouring out one's heart before God, through which the point, which corresponds to my mouth will speak wisdoms, shines into the heart, into my heart will speak understanding. Through this, all disgraces of the heart, which are the passions, the fallen passions, are dissolved, for there, near the good point, the light of holy love shines. See all this there well. Section 2. This corresponds to the recitation of the priestly blessing at the conclusion of the silent prayer before the blessing for peace. The good point corresponds to the covenant of peace, as explained in the lesson, where the holy love which corresponds to the priest to Abraham, as in, you are a priest forever, Psalms 110:4 dwells, as explained in the lesson. For this reason, the essence of prayer is to illuminate and bind this point to the heart, in order to dissolve the disgraces of the heart through the light of holy love that dwells at this point. This is why we must pray wholeheartedly, for prayer is the service of the heart. As our sages said, what is a service of the heart? Prayer, Ta'anit 2a. This is the essence of the service of prayer, to purify and refine the heart from all disgrace of the heart, the foreskin of the heart, through the speech of prayer, which corresponds to Tzaddik rules, which corresponds to the holy point where the holy love dwells. Thus, all types of distracting confusions and evil thoughts arise in the heart during prayer, for the essence of prayer is to dissolve them. All foreign thoughts and all distracting confusions come from the disgrace of the heart, the foreskin of the heart, the brokenness of the heart, for they disgrace and break a person's heart. And since a person seeks to dissolve them through the speech of prayer, they therefore intensify specifically then, just as when two people are fighting, when one is close to overcoming the other will garner all his strength so as not to be completely subdued. That is why prayer is a great battle. This corresponds to Hannah spoke to her heart, 1 Samuel 1:13. For the essence of prayer is to bind speech to the heart in order to dissolve the disgrace and brokenness of the heart through speech, which corresponds to the holy point, which corresponds to Tzaddik rules, where the holy point dwells, through which the disgraces of the heart are dissolved. This is why the priests go up to bless the Jewish people at the end of the prayer before the blessing for peace, for that is the main rectification of prayer. This is what we have accomplished with the prayer. We are now worthy, at the conclusion of the prayer, that the priests go up to the priestly blessing. For the priests, who correspond to the holy love that dwells near the point, is the speech of prayer, through which comes the rectification of prayer. That is why at the end of prayer, the priests must go up to bless, for the holy love corresponding to the priest is then manifested, which is what brings about the rectification of prayer. Thus, they step forward just prior to the blessing for peace and conclude their priestly blessing with peace, for love, which corresponds to the priest, dwells near the point, which corresponds to the covenant of peace, as stated regarding the priesthood of Pinchas, I hereby grant you my covenant of peace. Section 3. This is why the priests must bless with their hands uplifted. Raising the hands corresponds to the uplifting of the heart, for the hands are close to the heart, and by raising the hands, the heart is uplifted, as in, let us uplift our hearts with our hands to God in heaven. Lamentations 3:41. In other words, by the priests raising their hands to bless the Jewish people, they are uplifting the heart to the speech of the mouth, where the holy love dwells, so that the heart will receive an illumination and rectification from there. This is the essence of the rectification of prayer, which is completed by the priests, who correspond to the love that dwells near the covenant of peace, which is the point. This is why they recite, to bless his people Israel with love, specifically with love. For the main rectification is through the manifestation of the holy love, corresponding to the priest, as in, love conceals all transgressions. That is how the priest atones for all sins, for love conceals all transgressions. Section 4. This corresponds to the 3 blessings of the priest, which include 3 divine names. May God bless you, may God shine, and may God favor. These correspond to the 3 points, which are the point of the tzaddik, the point that each individual Jew possesses that another does not possess, and the point of each and every individual on his own. The rectification comes through these 3 points, for the point corresponds to the tzaddik, to the holy good, to God's name, who is the tzaddik of the world, as in, God is a tzaddik in all his ways. Psalms 145:17. For the good point corresponds to the part of God above, that is, in each and every Jewish person. That is why the 3 points are alluded to in the 3 names of the priestly blessing. And we can find a more specific allusion to the 3 points in the 3 priestly blessings as follows. The first blessing, may God bless you, corresponds to the point of the tzaddik himself, who is the source of blessing, as written, blessings upon the head of the tzaddik, Proverbs 10:6, as written, he will receive a blessing from God, Psalms 24:5. For first one must receive from there, for it is the all-inclusive point, the source of blessing. Thus, may God bless you and guard you from harm, which refers to the harmful energies in the world, the evil forces, which all came into existence as a result of the breaking of the vessels. Through the blessing that is evoked from the source of blessing, from the point of the tzaddik, foundation of the world, the breaking is rectified, through which one is guarded from harm. Then, may God shine his countenance, corresponds to the second point that each Jew possesses that another does not possess, and which each one must receive from the other. This is, may God shine his countenance, corresponding to the shining of the countenance, for the good points in each individual Jewish person who are in the category of tzaddikim, correspond to God's countenance, as in tzaddikim are the face of God. See Zohar, Part 2, 163b. The more that each shines into the other, the more that God's countenance shines. This is the essence of human service, to evoke and illuminate God's countenance in the world, as written, seek God and his might. Search for his countenance at all times, Psalms 105:4. And this is a generation of seekers who seek your countenance, there 24:6. And the main way of seeking God's countenance is in the above way, that is, by each one speaking with the other about awe of God, seeking and trying to receive illumination from each other, from the good points in each other's hearts, which correspond to God's countenance, on account of which God will fill the requests of our hearts and shine his countenance into them with love, as written, if you seek him, he will make himself present for you. 1 Chronicles 28:9. This corresponds to, the glory of a king is with a multitude, Proverbs 14:28. Through a multitude that seeks to speak about the awe of heaven, to reveal and illuminate the good points from one to another, the king is glorified God's countenance, which corresponds to the glory of a king, as in, majesty and glory is before him shines. We see from the Hodu Psalm as well, seeking God's countenance, as in, seek his countenance at all times, is through speaking with each other to arouse each other to God. As the verse says before that, speak about all his wonders. In other words, we must speak and discuss at length with each other about all of God's wonders to arouse each other to him so that we will be illuminated by each other's points, as in, search for God. Seek his countenance at all times. That is why the second priestly blessing, may God shine his countenance, corresponds to the second point of shining into each other. Thus, may God shine his countenance upon you and grace you. Grace and beauty correspond to the totality of colors, for when many colors are merged into each other, that is real grace and beauty, as the Rebbe writes elsewhere, Likutey Moharan, Part 125. This is the essence of the second point, to speak to each other about awe of God, to shine our points into each other, corresponding to an illumination of the countenance, and by the good points of many Jewish points merging into each other, which is God's main glory, as in Israel, in whom I am glorified, Isaiah 49:3. The Jewish people's grace is increased through the increase of colors and glory that shine into each other, since the good points in each Jewish person are themselves the grace and glory of the Jewish people. And the more that we speak with each other about the awe of God, through which the good points shine into each other, the glory and grace of the Jewish people is increased even more. This is, may God shine his countenance upon you and grace you, which is the second point. The third point is, may God grace his countenance upon you. The good point must be shined within oneself in order to bind, my mouth will speak wisdoms to the heart. Thus, may God grace his countenance upon you, means that he should grace the good point which corresponds to his countenance upon you, that he should bind the point to the heart, so that the point will shine into the heart and dissolve the disgrace of the heart. Then grant you peace. This is the ultimate purpose of all the three blessings, which are to evoke the holy love that dwells near the covenant of peace, which is the totality of all the 3 points. The binding of the 3 points to the heart corresponds to peace. For when the points are distant from the heart, there is no peace. As in, there is no peace in my bones, Psalms 38:4. And their hearts are sundered, Hosea 10:2, sundered from the point. But when the point is bound to the heart, this is the ultimate peace, as in, grant you peace, with which the priestly blessing is concluded. Section 5. Thus, from this lesson we see that the essence of prayer is in order to illuminate and bind the point which corresponds to, my mouth will speak wisdoms, to the heart, which corresponds to the conclusion of the verse. The thoughts of my heart are understanding, which corresponds to the full vowel, which corresponds to a tzaddik rules. For the Jewish people rule over prayer in order to evoke healing, sustenance, children, and so on, even a change of nature. Therefore, the silent prayer is 18 blessings, corresponding to the tzaddik is the life of the world. This is explained there in section 6, quoted verbatim. The full vowel is on the collective and individual levels. The 10 commandments with the tablets correspond to the full vowel, which is a dot and a line. The commandments are 10 dot, and the tablets are shaped like a line, as our sages said, Bava Batra 14a. The Torah and the world are also a dot and a line. The Torah is a dot, for it is called the beginning of wisdom, dot. Wisdom and the world is a line, for it was created in 6 days. The tzaddik and the Jewish people are also a dot and a line. And within each individual Jewish person, there is also a dot and a line. The dot is the mouth, as written, my mouth will speak wisdoms, and the line is, the thoughts of my heart are understanding, which corresponds to the tablets, which are a line, as written, bind them, write them on the tablets of your heart. Proverbs 3:3. Based on this, we can explain the 4 sections of prayer, the sacrificial service and the incense, which corresponds to the world of action, while the Pesukai de Zimra, the Kriyat Shema, and its blessings, and the silent prayer correspond to the other 3 of the 4 worlds. In the above quote from the lesson, the Rebbe lists 4 aspects of the full vowel, and these correspond to the 4 sections of prayer. For the essence of prayer is to evoke, illuminate, and bind the point, which corresponds to the full vowel. We first recite the sacrificial service and the incense, which purify the world of action. For the rectification of the world of action is through the sacrificial service and the incense. This creates the full vowel binding the world to the Torah. Before the world has been purified, it surely lacks the power to bind to the Holy Torah. But by our reciting of the sacrificial service and the incense, with which we purify and rectify the world of action from the forces of evil, we thereby bind the world of action that was created in 6 days, which corresponds to the line, to the Torah, which corresponds to the dot. This is why the Anshe Ma'amad, those who stood by in the temple during the sacrificial service, studied Torah during the service. The essence of the sacrificial service was to purify the world and bind it to the Torah, for which reason they studied specifically the section of Genesis that speaks about the beginning of creation, that God created the world in 6 days. Through this, we evoke and illuminate the line and bind it to the Torah, which corresponds to a dot, which corresponds to Breshit, for Breshit corresponds to a point, as brought. Breshit is a point in his palace, Tikuni Zohar 5, which corresponds to Reshit Chochmah, the beginning of wisdom. For when we attest that God created the world in 6 days, the point, which is wisdom, corresponding to Torah, is illuminated, for with it the world was created. as in, God looked into the Torah and created the world. Zohar, Part 2, 161a. And the world itself corresponds to wisdom, as written, You created them all with wisdom. Psalms 104, 24. This corresponds to where is the site of the sacrificial offerings, which we recite. This is in order to clarify and illuminate all the good points that are found throughout the temple, that they illuminate throughout the world, through which the world will be able to bind to the Torah. For the main illumination of the holy point is in the temple, for it is sited on the point of the foundation stone, which corresponds to the holy point of the world, upon which stood the ark with the 10 commandments, where the world was bound and merged with the Torah. From there, holiness was drawn into all places in the temple, and from there to Jerusalem and the entire land of Israel, which was sanctified with 10 sanctities, one above the other Kelim, 1:6, corresponding to the light of the point, which corresponds to a dot, corresponding to the 10 commandments. The closer the site is to the point of the foundation stone, the holier it is. Thus, each sacrificial offering, according to the atonement it was supposed to bring about, had a designated site in the temple where it was slaughtered, and so on. For the essence of atonement for sins is through the light of the point, where the light of holy love dwells, as in, love conceals all transgressions. That is why all the sacrifices were offered by the priest, for the priest corresponds to loving kindness, which corresponds to the holy love. Thus, the atonement that the sacrifice was supposed to accomplish was what designated its site in the temple. For the greater the atonement it had to accomplish, the more specific and fixed its site needed to be. For instance, the Holy of Holy sacrifices were offered only in the northern section of the temple, while there were other sacrifices whose blood needed to be brought into the inner sanctuary, all according to the atonement that the sacrifice had to evoke from the point of the foundation stone, where the holy love dwelled. Thus, on Yom Kippur, when the entire people of Israel need an atonement for all sins and transgressions for the entire year, the high priest had to enter into the inner sanctuary, to the very point of the foundation stone, to the site of the ark and the tablets, to evoke atonement and forgiveness from the point itself, where the holy love dwells, through which atonement can be obtained. As in, love conceals all transgressions. Section 6. After this, we recite the Pesukei de Zimra to bind the 10 commandments to the tablets. The binding of the letters of the Torah, of the 10 commandments to the tablets, is a wonder of the all-knowing, for the Torah is God's oneness, and God is exalted above all spirituality. It is thus a great wonder how the Torah is able to take form in the letters so that they can be written on a scroll on tablets. However, God, out of His love of the Jewish people, constricted the light of the Torah in many ways until the Torah was able to be contained within the letters and written on the tablets. This corresponds to the tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God. Exodus 32:16. This means that the tablets, which had the power that the letters of the Torah could be formed on them, were the work of God, for they were His wonders. Similarly, the writing that the letters of the Torah were written on the tablets were the writing of God, for it was an awesome wonder that the letters of the Torah could be formed and written on the minds. Tablets, the letters of the Torah at their source, are very exalted and awesome lights that all the worlds cannot contain, certainly not this physical world. Yet, with His awesome wonders, they were constricted to the point that they could be written on the tablets, all so that the Jewish people would be able to receive the light of the Torah in order that they know how to fulfill His will and to cleave to Him. Thus, when the people sinned with the golden calf and the tablets were broken, the letters flew off the tablets, which then became heavy for Moses, which is why he broke them. As our sages said, Midrash Tanchuma Ekev 11. For obviously, when the Jewish people are not fulfilling God's will, the tablets cannot contain the great light of the letters of the Torah. Thus, the letters flew off the tablets, and tablets were broken. For the tablets can only contain the light of the letters of the Holy Torah when the Jewish people fulfill God's will and focus their hearts on the Torah, endeavoring that the words of the Torah be engraved and written on their hearts, as in, write them on the tablets of your heart. Proverbs 3:3. Then, out of His love, God constricts the letters of the Torah in amazing ways and purifies this world so that it has the ability to contain the light of the Torah. Then, the letters of the Torah are able to take form, to be written on, and to endure on the tablets. This is represented by the writing of a Torah scroll on parchment. So now, due to our many sins, after the tablets were broken, though we write Torah scrolls on parchment and paper, not everyone is able to attain the light of the Torah. For not everyone is able to attain the level at which the letters of the Torah will be well written and well bound to the scroll. For there are flying letters, which is the cause of forgetfulness, as our sages said, Eruvin 54a, for though the letters are written in a book, the person nevertheless does not see their light at all. This corresponds to the forgetting of the Torah that is caused by the breaking of the tablets, which corresponds to the letters that flew off the tablets, causing the tablets to break. This can sometimes even lead a person to see in the Torah the opposite of what it actually says, if the person does not focus his heart on the truth. As our sages said, if one is worthy, it becomes his potion of life, and if one is not worthy, it becomes his potion of death. Yoma 72b. And the bonding of the light of the letters of the Torah to the book, which corresponds to the rectification of the breaking of the tablets, is through melody and song to God, which corresponds to all the songs and praises that we express before God, which is the entire book of Psalms composed by King David, which is comprised of all the 10 types of melodies. This is because the bonding of two things that are very distant from each other, such as two opposites, is mainly through melody, as the Rebbe said, Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 237, as in, now my husband will accompany me, which Leah declared when Levi, who represents the realm of melody, was born. For cleaving and bonding to God from this very lowly and material world is through melody. We see this empirically. Even someone who is very distant from God, languishing at a very low level, will usually be aroused to God by a melody, reminding himself where he has fallen to. However, when one hears a melody from an evil or frivolous musician, who are so common nowadays, this can spiritual harm a person, as the Rebbe says elsewhere, Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 3. On the other hand, when we hear a melody or song from authentically upright people who focus their hearts to the truth, to God, or when one sings some melody or song to oneself with devotion to God, one can become very aroused to Him, as I myself heard from the Rebbe. For the main way to bond and cleave to God, who is so exalted from this material world, especially if someone has sinned and become very distant from his Father in heaven, is through melody and song, which is all the songs and praises that we express before God. This is why King David composed the Book of Psalms, which is comprised of all the 10 types of melodies, as our sages said, Bava Batra 14a. King David corresponds to the Messiah, who is devoted to rectifying the blemish of the breaking of the tablets, which was caused by the sin of the golden calf, which was caused by the blemish of the covenant. As our sages said, the Israelites worshipped idolatry only in order to rationalize public lewdness. Sanhedrin 63b. This is what caused all of the destructions. David, who is the Messiah, is devoted to rectifying this, which is the rectification of all worlds. That is why he composed the Book of Psalms, which corresponds to the 10 types of melodies. For through the 10 types of melodies, we rectify the breaking of the tablets. Since we cleave and bond the heart to God through a melody from wherever we are, to the point that one becomes able to receive the light of the letters of the Torah, as in, write them on the tablet of your heart. Similarly, To the degree that the heart is drawn after God, so do the tablets have the power to contain the light of the letters of the Torah, which corresponds to the rectification of the breaking of the tablets, which corresponds to the breaking of the heart. This is, bind them on your throat, write them on the tablet of your heart. They are juxtaposed, for the throat is what makes the sound of the melody, which is what rectifies the breaking of the tablets. This is when one's melody is for the sake of heaven, when one hums and sings to God in order to cleave to Him and to His Torah. Furthermore, bind them on your throat means that one should bind the words of the Torah to one's throat, which is the source of the sound of melody, so that all of one's sounds of melody should be for the sake of heaven, to bind the words of the Torah to one's heart, through which write them on the tablet of your heart, for this is how the words of the Torah will be written and engraved on one's heart. This empowers the tablets and the books to contain the light of the letters of the Torah, and that the letters endure on them, which is the rectification of the breaking of the tablets. Section 7. This corresponds to the Pesukei de Zimra that we recite before the Kriyat Shema and the silent prayer. It is impossible to bind ourselves to God and to merge into His oneness and cleave to Him during the Shema and the prayer other than through songs and praises, which correspond to the 10 types of melodies, which correspond to the Pesukei de Zimra, which we recite beforehand. Thus, the Pesukei de Zimra represent the bonding of the 10 commandments to the tablets, which correspond to the full vowel. For the main bonding of the holy letters of the 10 commandments to the tablets is through melody and song, which correspond to the Pesukei de Zimra. That is why we recite the 10 chapters of Psalms that conclude with Hallelujah, corresponding to the 10 commandments, which correspond to the 10 types of melodies. Section 8. This corresponds to the Song at the Sea, which we recite every day prior to the Kriyat Shema and the silent prayer. The splitting of the Red Sea corresponds to the composing of the holy books of the Torah, which, as said, is a very amazing phenomenon that the light of the letters of the Torah can be formed in a book. But God, however, out of His love for the Jewish people, constricted them in wondrous ways such that they could take form in a book. This corresponds to the splitting of the Red Sea, which corresponds to, let the waters beneath the heavens gather to one place, and let the earth be seen. Genesis 1:9. This is the source of the miracle of the splitting of the Red Sea. For the splitting of the Red Sea points to the creation of the world, just as at the time of creation, God gathered all the waters to one place. So did He command the waters to gather, so that the Israelites would pass through the sea on dry land. This corresponds to the constriction of the light of the Torah, so that this world will be able to contain it. For the light of the Torah at its root corresponds to a great and wide sea, as in a sea of wisdom, as written, "The earth will be filled with knowledge of God as the waters cover the seabed." Isaiah 11:9. But on account of the immensity of the sea of wisdom, it is impossible to enter it and receive from it other than by properly preparing one's heart to God. And then God has compassion on the person, and in His amazing ways constricts these waters of knowledge, and makes a road through the sea and a path through fierce waters. Isaiah 43:16. So that the lower worlds will be able to receive the waters of knowledge gradually and in measure. This corresponds to the constriction of the letters of the Holy Torah. Each and every letter comes from a fountain that flows from, the fountain that emerges from the house of God. Joel 4:18. And out of His love of the Jewish people, who prepare their hearts to Him, He empowers the letters to constrict the sea of wisdom so that we are able to pass through it and to be nourished by the light of the Torah. That is why the Israelites attained such awesome perceptions during the splitting of the Red Sea, as our sages said, even a maidservant perceived at the sea. Mechilta, Beshalach. For the splitting of the Red Sea corresponds to the splitting of the waters of wisdom through the amazing constrictions of the letters of the Torah, so that we are able to pass through them and to draw from them, as in, You shall draw water with joy from the well springs of salvation. Isaiah 12:3, translated in the Targum as, You shall receive new teaching. This is the meaning of what is stated in the Zohar. In the first exile, you split the sea with a pen. In the final exile, with a reed, which is the quill that splits the sea of Torah. Tikkunim 47. For the quill writes the words of Torah in a book, which corresponds to the splitting of the Red Sea, as said. That is why the Israelites sang at the sea, for the main cleaving and bonding of the letters of the Torah to a book, which corresponds to the splitting of the Red Sea, is through song and melody, as said earlier. Section 9. This corresponds to Noah's Ark and Moses' cradle, both of which floated atop the water, for their arks were drawn from the letters of the Torah. The flood waters were caused mainly by the people's sins against God and their blemishing the covenant, such that the letters of the Torah were unable to be constricted into this world and sustain it. Even in Noah's generation before Torah giving, the world was sustained mainly by the letters of the Torah that preceded creation and with which the world was created. Furthermore, the 7 universal commandments had already been commanded, and the existence of the world was dependent upon them. But humanity transgressed them, and the letters of the Torah were thus unable to constrict the waters of the sea, which is why all the fountains of the great depth were opened and caused the flood. Noah, though, was a tzaddik and was saved by the ark letters that was built with real letters and words, the letters and words of the Torah that he had fulfilled. That is how he was able to enter into the ark, and how it had to power to float atop the waters, thus rescuing him and his offspring and saving the world. Similarly, with Moses' cradle, which saved him by floating atop the water, since Moses was destined to receive the Torah that constricts the waters of the Great Sea. Noah, however, was only able to save himself and his offspring through the ark letters, whereas Moses rescued the entire Jewish people and transmitted the letters and words of the Torah to them for eternity. Hence, the Pesukai de Zimra and the Song at the Sea correspond to the merging of the 10 Commandments with the tablets, which corresponds to the full vowel. Section 10. Then we recite the Shema and its blessings, which are the blessing over the luminaries, the blessing over the Torah, and the blessing over the redemption. This corresponds to the point of the full vowel, which is brought about by the tzaddik together with the Jewish people. The essence of the point is the tzaddik, who is the all-inclusive point, which corresponds to the Kriyat Shema and its blessings. The Kriyat Shema is the acceptance of God's oneness, which is the essence of the light of the holy point, for the essence of the good point is to merge into his oneness, which is the source of the good point, since the point, corresponding to the tzaddik, is itself a simple oneness with God. This corresponds to the blessing over the luminaries, for the light of all the luminaries comes from the point of the tzaddik, who is called a light, as written, "A light is sown for the tzaddik," Psalms 97:9, from whom the entire Torah emerges, that is, the blessing over the Torah. Then there is the blessing over the redemption, which must be immediately followed by the silent prayer, since redemption corresponds to the tzaddik, who is called a redeemer, as written, "If he redeems you," good, Ruth 3:13, and as the Rebbe said elsewhere, that redemption and prayer correspond to Boaz and Ruth. Boaz is the tzaddik, corresponding to redemption. See Likutey Moharan, Part 2, 102. Section 11. Then we have the silent prayer, which is the main part of the daily prayers, the 18 blessings that are a service of the heart. This corresponds to the point of the full vowel that is formed for each and every individual for himself, by his connecting, "My mouth will speak wisdoms," to the thoughts of my heart are understandings, meaning that by speaking words of prayer with great devotion and proper focus of heart to what one is saying, one binds the words of one's mouth to one's heart, through which the point shines into the heart, through which everything is rectified. This is the entire service of the heart. Section 12. This corresponds to the entire Torah section of Pinchas. Pinchas attained priesthood by his zealousness in response to Zimri's blemishing of the covenant. With his zealousness, he evoked a rectification of the covenant, through which he attained the priesthood, which corresponds to the holy love that dwells near the point, which is the covenant of peace. As written, I hereby grant him my covenant of peace. Numbers 25:12. As explained in the lesson, the entire story of Pinchas was to rectify, subdue, and eradicate the evil force of Balaam from the world, which is the blemish of the covenant. As written, they were a stumbling block for the Israelites upon Balaam's advice there. 31:16. Balaam was very blemished, disgusting, and abominable in this passion, as our sages said, Sanhedrin 105b, and pursued it his entire life. He made no effort to override his passions with holy words, which correspond to the 3 points: speaking to God, speaking with one's friends, and speaking with the tzaddik. Had he done so, he, even in his decrepit state, would have been able to rise out of the depth of his descent and come close to God. But Balaam and his followers do not seek this. And not only are they so addicted to their sexual passions, but they don't even try to speak holy words in these 3 ways. And if that were not enough, they also do the complete opposite, gravely defiling their speech with evil words of mockery, gossip, slander, idle chatter, and obscenities, even mocking and slandering the authentic tzaddikim and their followers, thereby certainly distancing themselves from the 3 points, thus sinking ever more deeper into their evil passions. But so doing, they do not harm only themselves, but harm the entire Jewish people with their evil speech. For just as the tzaddikim and their followers shine the good point into the Jewish people through their good speech, they, with their evil speech, cause great distancing from the point. This was Balak's plan, to befall Balaam's evil power upon the Israelites, to harm them with the evil speech of those deeply sunken into sexual passion, who correspond to Balaam and his followers, who oppose the tzaddik, Moses. As our sages said, they asked the Midianites about Moses, and they said, his power is only with his mouth. We will attack the Israelites with a person whose power is with his mouth. Numbers Rabbah 24. In other words, the power of the tzaddik, who corresponds to Moses, is only with his mouth, by shining and evoking the good points with his speech. Thus, we too will attack with a person whose power is with his mouth, Balaam, who speaks the very opposite of the speech of the tzaddik, who corresponds to Moses. The Israelites were thus in very grave danger when Balak sent for Balaam, for speech has immense power, whether for holiness or for the opposite, as written, my people, remember what Balak, king of Moab, planned against you, and how Balaam, son of Beor, responded to him. Micha 6:5. It seems from this verse that there was indeed a very deep strategy by the forces of evil to bring Balaam, but God in his compassion stood up to protect the people, transforming the curse into a blessing. That is why the angel stood still in 3 places, regarding which our sages said, this was an allusion to the 3 forefathers, for the 3 forefathers correspond to the 3 points as brought elsewhere. In other words, God showed Balaam that the 3 points, which correspond to the 3 forefathers, which the tzaddikim and their followers evoke with the holy speech of their mouths, transcend his defiled speech and will surely subdue him. This also corresponds to what the ass said to him, you have struck me 3 times. Numbers 22:28. Upon which Rashi comments, you seek to uproot a people that celebrates 3 festivals. The 3 festivals correspond to the 3 forefathers, as brought, and the ass was thus saying that the 3 points of the Israelites, which they evoke with their holy speech, will certainly overcome Balaam's defiled speech. Thus, when the curse was transformed into a blessing, Balaam blessed them 3 times, as written, behold, you have blessed now 3 times. Numbers 24:10. Corresponding to the 3 points which overcame the speech of Balaam, transforming the curse into a blessing. Section 13. This explains the sequence of all the sections in the weekly portion of Pinchas. Pinchas subdued the evil of Bilam, on account of which he attained priesthood, which corresponds to the light of holy love that dwells near the point, which is the covenant of peace. The forces of evil, the source of fallen loves, were thus eradicated, which is why the Israelites were then able to wipe out all the Midianites, as described immediately after Pinchas was granted priesthood. Harass the Midianites and strike them down. Now, after Pinchas had attained priesthood, which is the holy love, through which the forces of evil, the fallen loves, were eradicated, they were certainly able to strike down and wipe out the Midianites, who had seduced the Israelites with the power of Bilam, and who themselves corresponded to the forces of evil that arose from the breaking of the vessels, the fallen loves, for now they are dispelled by the holy love that Pinchas attained. This is why Pinchas personally went out to this battle, and he personally killed Bilam, as our sages said, Numbers Rabbah 22, for the subdual was mainly by Pinchas, who attained holy love, which corresponds to priesthood. Section 14. And this is why they were immediately afterward instructed to take a census of the Israelites, in order to arouse each and every soul of the 60,000 Jewish souls, so as to evoke the good point that exists in each and every Jewish soul, in order to purify them from the defilement of Bilam, which corresponds to the blemish of the covenant. For each and every Jewish person possesses a good point that the other does not possess, as explained in the lesson. That is why it was necessary to count all Israelites of army age, all who go out to fight God's battles in this world, in order to arouse the power of the good point that exists in each individual. This is what Rashi means by Hachanoch Y, my name attests for them. This refers to the rectification of the covenant. The letter Hey precedes the name, and the letter Yud follows it, meaning that by the very mention of their name, the good point represented by the Yud that exists in each and every one, which corresponds to God's name, is aroused, for the good point corresponds to the part of God above that exists in each and every individual, which corresponds to His name. This is why whenever the Israelites moved from the profane into holiness, they were counted. They were counted after they left Egypt. They were counted after they sinned with the golden calf and needed to purify themselves from it through the construction of the sanctuary. And they were counted after the encounter with Bilam and Midian. The census is in order to arouse the holy point that is in each Jewish person, through which one is purified from all defilements. Section 15. Immediately after this comes the section dealing with the inheritance of the land of Israel, as written, "To these shall the land be divided as inheritance, according to the number of names." Numbers 26:23. The light of the holy point is evoked in many ways, according to the individual, the place, and the time. In the world at large, the point is the Jewish people as a whole. Within the Jewish people, the point is the authentic tzaddik. Regarding place, for place too has a good point. The land of Israel is the good point of the entire world. Within the land of Israel, there are 10 levels of sanctity, and the highest point is the foundation stone, which is the point of the land of Israel, the point of the entire world. And in time, each and every day has its own good point, for there is no day without good. Zohar, Part 3, 123a. But the point of time in general, the 7 days of creation, is the Shabbat, which is the point that shines into the 6 workdays of the week, in which the world was created. The point of the year and of the months is the new moon and the festivals. And the highest point of the year and of the festivals is Yom Kippur. As written, days are formed, and he has one of them. Psalms 139:16, which is Yom Kippur, on which the high priest, who corresponded to the tzaddik of the generation, to the all-inclusive point, entered into the site of the foundation stone, which is the point of the world. Hence, all the good points that of the tzaddik, of place and of time, merged on this day. That is why it is a day of forgiveness and atonement for all sins, since the quintessence of the point shines very greatly through the merging of all these aspects, soul, place, and time. On account of this, the holy love that dwells near the point shines greatly, through which all sins are forgiven, corresponding to love conceals all transgressions. This is why the section dealing with the inheritance of the land of Israel comes immediately after the section of the census in the weekly reading of Pinchas. For the land of Israel is the place where the Jewish people are able to receive the light of the point from each other, according to each one's portion in the land. Section 16. The section discussing Moses' departing follows this. Moses was the tzaddik of the generation, corresponding to the all-inclusive point, and who gave the Torah, which corresponds to the point, to the Jewish people. He should have entered into the land of Israel, which is the point of the world, the main site of holiness, which is the light of the Torah, for the light of the Torah is most perfectly received in the land of Israel. Had this happened, everything would have been rectified. However, on account of the Israelites' sin that caused even Moses to err by striking the rock for water, it was decreed upon him not to enter the land. The main blemish of his striking the rock was a blemish of speech, as written, "When you rebelled against me at the waters of dispute," Deuteronomy 32:51. For the main blemish was that they did not speak to the rock, as God had instructed them, speak to the rock, with which they would have shown the great power of their speech. This power would have been able to extract both material and spiritual water, for just as they would have extracted material water, they would have also extracted the waters of knowledge of the Torah on a spiritual plane, through which they would have sanctified God's name. For everyone would have seen the great power of speech, and would have endeavored to evoke holiness upon themselves through speech, through which the light of the point is evoked, which is the main means of coming close to God. All this was caused by the dispute, represented by the waters of dispute, which confused even Moses, as written, "Quarrel confuses the wise," Ecclesiastes 7:7. As our sages said, Exodus Rabbah 6:2, the holy point corresponds to peace, to the covenant of peace, for its core is dependent upon peace. Since whoever does not endeavor to seclude himself in prayer and pouring out his heart before God to arouse his heart to Him is in the category of dispute, as in, their heart is split, Hosea 10:2. For the heart is split from the mouth, from the holy point. Similarly, when there is no peace between one Jew and another, they are obviously unable to speak with each other about awe of God, since they are in dispute. But even when there is no actual dispute, but only a lack of full love among the Jewish people who are commanded to love each other as themselves, as written, "Love your neighbor as yourself," Leviticus 18:19. And those studying Torah must be especially careful to maintain great love between them. As we see from the Ari's countless warnings about this, when this perfect love is lacking, the people cannot talk to one another properly and do not shine the light of the holy point into each other. All the more so when there is dispute against the authentic tzaddik, who is the all-inclusive point of the entire Jewish people, and when there is dispute against him, they cannot receive the light of his point. Hence, receiving the light of the point is mainly through peace, and therefore through dispute, corresponding to the waters of dispute. The people caused Moses to err and to strike the rock rather than speak to it. This caused the decree that he will not enter the land, which is the place in which to receive the light of the point in perfection. Had Moses entered the land with the people, they would have received from him the light of the point in perfection, and everything would have been rectified. But due to our sins, the dispute caused that Moses did not enter, as a result of which we were eventually exiled from the land. And similarly, in every generation appear authentic tzaddikim corresponding to Moses, to the all-inclusive point, through which they rectify many souls and bring them back in repentance. And with their power, they could have rectified everything, but through dispute, people cause what they cause. May God have compassion on them and forgive them and transform everything into good so that everything is rectified. Moses thus requested, "May God, God of the spirits, appoint a man over the congregation," Numbers 27:16, which Rashi explains to mean someone who knows how to work with the spirit of each and every individual, which means that he should be able to shine the point into the heart of each Israelite. The point corresponds to the Spirit of God, to Joseph the Tzaddik, about whom it was said, "A man in whom is the Spirit of God," Genesis 41:38, after which Joseph was the ruler there, 42:6, which corresponds to a tzaddik rules, to the all-inclusive point that shines into each and every Jewish person. This is someone who knows how to work with the spirit of each and every individual. Section 17. After this comes the section dealing with all the sacrifices of the entire year, the daily offerings, the additional offerings of the Shabbat, festival, and new moon. This corresponds to evoking the point that is in each and every day, as well as the inclusive point of the Shabbat and festivals, for which reason we bring the additional offerings on the Shabbat and festivals. It all depended upon the point that needed to be evoked on that day. For through the offerings that were brought in the temple by the priest, the light of the holy point was evoked and shined, which was mainly in the temple, evoked by the priest, according to the day. This brought about the forgiving of sins, as in, love conceals all transgressions. Hence, all the sections in the weekly reading of Pinchas are sequenced in an amazing way, for they all speak about evoking the light of the holy point in general, and for the individual, according to the person, the place, and the time. Through this, all forces of evil, which are the fallen loves which correspond to all the sacrifices that subdue the animal spirit, the animal passions, which correspond to the fallen loves, are subdued by the priest, who corresponds to the holy love that dwells near the holy point, which shines greatly in the temple. Through this, the breaking of the vessels, which corresponds to the breaking of the tablets, is rectified, through which everything is rectified, through which the full redemption will come about speedily in our days. Amen. Laws of Nefilat Apayim. Section 18. This corresponds to the prayers of confession and the lowering of the head recited immediately after the silent prayer. After the silent prayer is the time to confess one's sins and to ask forgiveness and atonement for them, as on Yom Kippur. For through the prayer, we bind the heart to the point through which all disgraces of the heart, corresponding to all the sins and transgressions, are dissolved, as in, love conceals all transgressions. Thus, this is the time to confess all of one's sins and transgressions and to ask forgiveness for them, since now the love that dwells near the point and that conceals all transgressions, which are the disgraces of the heart, has been aroused. Hence, this is the time for the forgiveness of sins, and clearly, now is the time to confess them and to ask for their forgiveness, as on Yom Kippur, which is the time when sins are forgiven, since that is when the point shines the most intensely, for that is when the high priest enters into the innermost chamber, to the point of the foundation stone. Then, on Yom Kippur, we must confess and ask forgiveness for all sins. And similarly now, after prayers, when the point shines as a result of our prayer service, through which sins are forgiven, is clearly the time to confess and ask for forgiveness. For we must confess and ask for forgiveness at the time of forgiveness, as we do on Yom Kippur. This corresponds to the Nefilat Apayim prayer, the lowering of the face, which corresponds to the great shame and disgrace that we feel about ourselves before God over our many transgressions before Him, while He, in His compassion, arouses His love and forgives us, concealing all our transgressions with His great love. We are intensely ashamed of ourselves before Him on account of this. This is then the lowering of the face. we symbolically fall to the floor and cover our faces out of great disgrace and shame before Him for His immense kindness with us, for concealing our transgressions with love and wiping away our disgrace. This is what is in fact most appropriate to do when God is busy forgiving our transgressions and wiping away our disgrace and shame. We must specifically then confess and be very ashamed of ourselves over our many transgressions and the great kindness that He does toward us with love. Various verses speak about being very ashamed before God when He forgives our sins, as for instance, so that you remember and be ashamed, and no longer have an excuse before your disgrace when I forgive you for everything you have done. Ezekiel 16:63. And later on there, after speaking about the immense kindness that God will do for us and purify us of all our impurities, as written, I will sprinkle on you pure waters, and you shall be purified. There, 36:25, the verse says, and remember your evil ways and deeds which are not good. Be humiliated in your own eyes. Be ashamed and disgraced of your ways. There, 31-32. There are other examples as well. This is the connection to the lowering of the face after prayers. The entire prayer service is to bind the heart to the point in order to arouse the love that dwells there, by means of which God atones for all of our transgressions. Thus, now is the time to confess our sins and to ask forgiveness for them, and to be very ashamed of ourselves for our sinful behavior before God and for His immense love and the kindness that He does with us. This corresponds to the lowering of the face. We symbolically fall to the earth and conceal our faces out of shame, on account of which God forgives our sins. For the essence of repentance is embarrassment, as the Rebbe says elsewhere, Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 6. And the more that we are embarrassed of ourselves, the more that God forgives our sins. For God wants that we at least acknowledge that we have sinned before Him, as written, but know your sin, for you have transgressed against your God. Jeremiah 3:13. And by falling to the earth, we also thereby evoke the light of the point that is in the mouth, as in, my mouth will speak wisdoms, into all the lower worlds and all the lower levels, all the way down to the very lowest level, in order to elevate from there all the holy sparks that have fallen there due to our sins. Since we have already bound the heart to the point through which the effects of the breaking of the vessels that fell into the world of creation are dissipated corresponding to understanding heart, we must now evoke the shining of the point into the other worlds and into the very low levels. For that is where the forces of evil that arose as a result of the breaking of the vessels have their greatest attachment. In the world of creation itself, they do not have such a strong attachment, and they are spread mostly throughout the other worlds, a bit in the world of formation, more in the world of action, and much more further down. When we are able to bind the heart to the point through speaking our hearts before God, which is the prayer service, the breaking of the vessels is rectified. Then we are able to evoke an illumination of the point even into all the other worlds and into all the lower levels, declaring and shining the truth of His godliness and the sanctity of His holy Torah into all of them, elevating all the sparks that have fallen into them on account of our sins that caused an increase in the breaking of the vessels. Now though, the breaking of the vessels is rectified through the light of the point that is bound to the heart through our prayers. Section 19. All this applies to the weekdays, on which we recite the Tachanun prayer, but on Shabbat and festivals, and other days of added sanctity, which corresponds to the sanctity of Shabbat and festivals, we do not recite the Tachanun prayer, for such a great love is aroused on these days that it is unnecessary to confess or be ashamed at all. It is also not necessary on these days to descend into the lower worlds and to elevate sparks from there, for everything is automatically rectified through the abundance of kindness and love that is greatly evoked on these days, since there is added sanctity on these days, which corresponds to the sanctity of Shabbat, when the point shines most intensely into the weekdays. For though we said above that when God dispels our disgrace, we must be very ashamed, this will not be forever. For obviously, with the complete rectification on the day of the future, that will be entirely Shabbat, we will certainly not be ashamed at all. As written, on that day you will not be ashamed of all your deeds. Zephaniah 3:11, and my people will never again be ashamed. Joel 3:27. Thus the days on which Tachanun is not recited allude to this time, for the sanctity of the Shabbat is greatly evoked on them, which alludes to the final and complete rectification, when shame will be completely dispelled. That is why we do not recite the Tachanun on these days. Section 20. This corresponds to the evoking of beneficence during the recitation of Ashri Yuval Lazayin, which is when the beneficence descends Shar HaKavanot 49a. This is because all beneficence is evoked through the point, the full vowel, as in, open your mouth wide and I will fill it, as explained at the beginning of the lesson. That is why we recite Kadosh 3 times in Uva Lazayin, corresponding to the 3 points from where beneficence is evoked, for the point corresponds to Kodesh, sanctity, as explained in the lesson. Thus, we first recite a Kedusha in the Kriyat Shema blessing for the luminaries. For the blessing for the luminaries and the Kriyat Shema correspond to the world of creation there, 22b, where we must bind the point, for the world of creation corresponds to the heart. That is why we recite there a Kedusha, which is the recitation of Kadosh 3 times, in order to evoke an illumination of the 3 points, which correspond to Kadosh, a line, as explained in the lesson. Then, in the silent prayer, which is the highest point of congregational sanctity, for it is the time of the illumination of the point that shines into the world of emanation, which corresponds to the silent prayer, which corresponds to, my mouth will speak wisdoms. It is the time to recite the most important Kedusha. After that, when we evoke the beneficence from the world of emanation into the world of creation during Ashrei Yuval Lazayin, we must again recite a Kedusha, for the main Kedusha must be recited in the worlds of creation and emanation, which correspond to the heart and the mouth, in order to bind the heart to the mouth, which corresponds to Kadosh, Holy Kadosh line. Thus, in the blessing for the luminaries, which corresponds to the world of creation, we bind creation, the heart, to emanation, which is the mouth. That is why we recite Kadosh 3 times, in order to evoke the holiness from the point from the 3 points. Then, in the silent prayer, which corresponds to the world of emanation, we must certainly recite the Kedusha, for that is the high point of holiness, for it holds the essence of the point, which corresponds to holiness, and from where we evoke holiness into the heart, which corresponds to the world of creation. Then, when we evoke the beneficence from emanation into creation during Ashrei Yuval Lazayin, we must again recite the Kedusha in order to be able to receive the beneficence that is evoked into the 3 points. For the essence of sanctity corresponds to creation and emanation, which correspond to the heart and the mouth, which correspond to Kadosh, Holy Kadosh line. Section 21. This corresponds to the song of the day that we recite afterward. The binding and illumination of the point into all the worlds is through song and melody, corresponding to the 10 types of melody. This was why the Levites sang during the temple service, for all sacrifices were for the purpose of binding all the worlds to the point that shines into the temple. That is why it was necessary for the Levites to sing during the sacrificial services, for the binding is accomplished mainly through song and melody. And this is the song of the day. Each and every day has its unique song that expresses the illumination of the point that shines into it from Shabbat, which is the quintessential point. That is why we mention Shabbat in the song of the day, as in, today is the first day of Shabbat. For the binding and the illumination of the point into all the worlds is through song, and the point corresponds to Shabbat, as said. After that, we immediately recite the service of the incense, which was the most beloved of all offerings, for it purifies all worlds, especially the world of action, from all forces of evil, through the sanctity of the light of the point that is evoked and shines, so that all will receive the beneficence and abundance that has been evoked through prayer. Section 22. This is why on Shabbat we mention all the songs that were sung by the Levites every day in the temple. For the song that they sang every day in the temple was evoked from the Shabbat, which is the quintessential point that shines into it and into all of the 6 weekdays in which all worlds were created. That is why each day has its own song, for each day has its own illumination of the point that is different from other days. That is why the Rebbe stresses at the beginning of the lesson, one must bind the heart to the point that shines at this time, as explained elsewhere. Laws of Torah Reading. Section 23. This corresponds to the public Torah reading during prayers. Prayer is for the purpose of binding the point to the heart, and the essence of the point is the Holy Torah that contains the 10 Commandments. As explained in the lesson, the righteousness of the tzaddik, who attains the point, is mainly through the Torah that he observes. For the Torah is called covenant. As written, these are the words of the covenant. Deuteronomy 28:69. Therefore, we must read from the Torah during prayers, in order to evoke the point from the Torah, which is the quintessence of the point. Section 24. And the Torah is only read in public, that is, in a quorum of 10, as stated in the Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 143:1. This is because the perfection of prayer is only in public, in a quorum of 10, for the 10 corresponds to the point, as explained in the lesson. When there are 10 people, all 3 points shine, for in praying together, they receive an illumination from each other, as in, the angels receive from each other. Each one also receives from within himself, as well as the collective point of the tzaddik shining into all of them. For the divine presence rests upon any gathering of 10 Sanhedrin, 39a, which corresponds to the illumination of the light of the tzaddik, who himself corresponds to the divine presence. This is because God's presence rests mainly upon the tzaddikim, for the tzaddikim are his chariot. In a congregation of 10, there must be a prayer leader leading the prayers, who must be the leading person in the congregation in general, as our sages said, Ta'anit 16a, which corresponds to the tzaddik, to the collective point in relation to the others, for he prays on their behalf. Thus, where there is a quorum of 10, all 3 points are shining, and then we read from the Torah in order to evoke the quintessential point of the Torah. We then recite a blessing over the Torah in public, even though we have already recited this blessing in the morning. This blessing concludes with, "Who gives us the Torah?" For the essence of the Torah reading and its blessings in public is to evoke anew the receiving of the Torah. During the reading, we must stand in great awe and trepidation in order to rectify the breaking of the tablets, which corresponds to the breaking of the vessels, which corresponds to the letters that flew off the tablets when the people sinned. In other words, the point, which corresponds to the 10 Commandments, disappeared from the tablets, which correspond to the line which caused them to break. Now, though, we endeavor to evoke and bind the point to the heart, which corresponds to the tablets, through the prayer service, which corresponds to the rectification of the breaking of the tablets. Thus, we read from the Torah out loud, in order to evoke the light of the point of the Torah through the speech of the mouth, as in, "My mouth will speak wisdoms." This is, "They are life to those who express them." Proverbs 4:22, on which our sages commented, "To those who express them with the mouth, Eruvin." 54a. Only then are they life, for that is how we rectify the breaking of the tablets, when the letters flew off them, for through speech we bind the letters to the tablets. Then they are life, as in, if one is worthy, it becomes for him a potion of life. Yoma 72b. In contrast to the breaking of the tablets, which corresponds to the breaking of the vessels, which is the cause of death, as written, "Indeed you shall die as humans." Psalms 82:7, which refers to the golden calf. Daf, as our sages said, Exodus Rabbah 32. This is, if one is not worthy, it becomes for him a potion of death. For one who is not worthy does not see the light of the letters of the Torah, which corresponds to the illumination of the point. For the light of the letters flew the tablets. Then one's study is as from the broken tablets, which causes forgetfulness, which is the cause of death, as explained earlier. Thus, we read the Torah out loud in public during the prayer service from a Torah scroll that was written according to Jewish law on parchment with the appropriate melody and vowels. Blessing before and after the reading with, "Who gives the Torah?" Through this, we evoke upon ourselves a new Torah giving and rectify the breaking of the tablets. Section 25. This corresponds to the teaching that the destruction was mainly because the people did not recite a blessing before Torah study, as our sages said on the verse, "Why was the land destroyed?" Jeremiah 9:11. What does it mean? They did not follow it. That they did not recite a blessing beforehand. Nedarim 81a. For by not reciting a blessing on the Torah, even if we are studying it, we thereby demonstrate that the Torah is not important to us and is not the very source of our lives from moment to moment, but is rather only for us some social or religious code of laws as any other religion. This corresponds to the sin of the golden calf, as written, "Make for us a God who will go before us." Exodus 32:1. They asked for some foreign service, some external system of laws that would go before them, for all they wanted was for some social or religious code of laws so that they would not kill each other. But they were not looking at the ultimate eternal purpose at all, which was what brought them to literal idolatry, since the attraction of idolatry was still powerful in the world. And though today idolatry has lost its attraction, for the sages vanquished this attraction Yoma 4a, there are nevertheless many in the world who follow the path of the heretics, who attempt to compare the Torah of Moses to the laws of other religions. They make empty and foolish statements about the holy commandments of the Torah as if they are only the product of human intellect in order to maintain law and order in society. This corresponds to the sin of the golden calf. This corresponds to, they did not recite a blessing prior to Torah study. These people certainly do not recite a blessing over the Torah, since for them, the Torah is no different than any other religion or ethical standard. Whereas the essence of the blessing over the Torah is, "Who chose us from among all the peoples and gave us his Torah." With giving us his Torah, he chose us from among all the peoples and completely separated us from them. Their ethics and religions are only human understanding for the purpose of earthly life in this world. And even this is not perfect and is insustainable. Since their religions and laws do not really prevent a person from interpersonal misdeeds, because they do not point the person to the ultimate purpose of life, nor use fear of punishment after death. They only use fear of social punishment, and therefore, if someone will be able to rob or lie and avoid being caught by the government, he will surely do whatever he wants. We see this empirically. But God has chosen us from among all the peoples and given us his Torah, which is our life and length of days, forever and for eternity. For the essence of all the commandments of the Holy Torah is for the ultimate purpose. Even the interpersonal commandments contain deep mysteries and very great and unfathomable esoteric secrets, all for the ultimate purpose of our eternal benefit in the future life. This is alluded to in the blessing over the Torah that we recite, "Who chose us from among all the peoples and gave us his Torah." We conclude this blessing with, "Who gives the Torah." This means that God gives the Torah every day, anew, as written, "That I command you today," Deuteronomy 6:6. Upon which our sages say, every day they should be as new in your eyes. For the Torah is drawn upon us every day with amazing newness. In this way as well is our holy Torah different from the religions of the other nations. Their religions, which are only social institutions for the protection of society, cannot be renewed every day, for the laws have already been established for some human rationale. Our holy Torah, however, which is God's oneness, and its words are incomprehensible and eternal, a wellspring of living waters every moment. Since they are contained within Him, enlivening and sustaining all the worlds with everything in them at every moment, are renewed every day and every moment. That is why we say, who gives the Torah? For God gives the Torah every day anew. For on every single day God causes events in such a way to promote the fulfillment of the Torah, sending us authentic tzaddikim who reveal new and authentic insights into the Torah. But even whenever someone who is unable to arrive at new insights into the Torah is aroused anew to fulfill the Torah, this too is considered receiving the Torah anew. For fulfilling the Torah is the most important thing, since study is not the essential, but the deed. Therefore, through the blessing over the Torah, we evoke a new receiving of the Torah. This corresponds to the rectification of the breaking of the tablets, which blemished the Torah giving. Thus, not reciting a blessing over the Torah caused the destruction of the temple, which is the site of the holy point. For the main cause of the destruction was the sin of the golden calf, which caused the tablets to break, after which the decree of destruction came about. The tablets were broken on the 17th of Tammuz, which is the day on which the destruction began. But by the blessing over the Torah, we evoke upon ourselves a new receiving of the Torah to rectify this. So by not reciting a blessing over the Torah and blemishing this, the temple was destroyed. This is why we recite a blessing over the Torah when we read it in public, even though we have already recited this blessing in the morning, since receiving the Torah anew, in order to rectify the breaking of the tablets, is brought about through the public Torah reading, as said. Section 26. This is why we recite the priestly blessing in the morning after the blessing over the Torah. The blessing over the Torah is essentially to rectify the breaking of the tablets in order to be able to evoke the light of the point of the Torah upon which the holy love rests, through which the breaking of the vessels, which corresponds to the breaking of the tablets, is rectified, which corresponds to the priestly blessing as explained at length above. Section 27. This corresponds to the weekly reading of the Torah from Genesis to the end, such that we complete the Torah reading every year. As explained in the lesson, each individual must bind himself to the point where his heart is at every given moment, for the point shines according to the situation the person is in and according to the day. Since the quintessential point is the Torah, as said above, we must therefore read the Torah every week so that we finish it every year, for the weekly reading is the guiding light for that week. All the days of the week receive sustenance from the point that shines into them through the weekly Torah reading. For the point that must be received during any given week comes through the weekly reading for that week, and so on, throughout the year, and from year to year. Hence, all the days of the year receive sustenance from the Torah, which is the all-encompassing point, and each and every week receives from its individual Torah reading, and each and every day receives from a specific Torah section. For each weekly Torah reading is divided into 7 parts, corresponding to the 7 days of the week, such that every day must receive its point from a specific Torah section, and so on, for every week. And the year as a whole receives from the Torah as a whole the all-encompassing point of the year as a whole. But the reading of the entire portion is on Shabbat, for Shabbat is the quintessential point, since it is permanent and shines into all 6 workdays. Thus, we call up 7 people on Shabbat, corresponding to the 7 days of the week, in order to illuminate the point on Shabbat through the Torah into all the days of the week. Section 28. This is why a minimum of 3 people must be called up to the Torah, and a minimum of 3 verses must be read for each, corresponding to the 3 points. This is also why the entire Torah is considered triple, as our sages said, "Blessed be God who gave us a triple Torah on the 3rd day of abstention through the 3rd-born Shabbat." 88a. All this corresponds to the 3 points which are comprised in the Torah. Section 29. This is why more people are called up on any day that has extra sanctity. On the new moon, when an additional offering was brought in the temple, we call up 4. On a festival, when work is forbidden, we call up 5. And so on. The more people called up, the more we are able to receive from the light of the point. For those called up to the Torah, shine the point into the entire congregation. That is why all present must pay close attention to the Torah reading and not daydream, and certainly not talk with someone, which is a very grave sin. By hearing the Torah reading, we evoke upon ourselves the illumination of the point from the Torah, upon which is dependent the rectification of all sins and passions that arise from the breaking of the vessels, which is rectified by the light of the point, upon which is dependent the rectification of the entire world. Thus, the more people called up to the Torah, the more that the point shines, for there is a unique good point in each and every Jewish person, and thus, the more people called up, the more that the point will shine into the Jewish people from its source in the Torah, in proportion to the additional point of each additional one called up. That is why on the new moon, we call up 4, because of the additional offering. The sacrificial service brought in the temple by the priest was to subdue and eradicate animal passions, which correspond to fall in love, through the point that shined in the temple. So, on a day when an additional offering was brought, such as on the new moon and the intermediate days of the festivals, the points shines more greatly. So we call up additional people to the Torah reading in order to evoke through them a greater illumination of the point. And on a festival, when work is forbidden, we call up even more 5 people. For the cessation of work means that the sanctity of Shabbat shines into these days more intensely. For all the necessity for work was caused by the filth of the serpent, whose power is from the forces of evil that arose from the breaking of the vessels, which caused, "With toil shall eat it with the sweat of your brow." That is the cause of all the toil of the 39 creative acts forbidden on Shabbat. Adam's sin caused an intensification of the breaking of the vessels, which is why we must toil in these 39 creative acts, for all of the creative acts correspond to the rectification of the breaking of the vessels. A person must toil in these acts in order to rectify and complete all things, which corresponds to the rectification of the vessels, to rectify the breaking of the vessels that was caused by Adam's sin. Thus, the greatest rectification is brought about through the work on the construction of the sanctuary, which required the 39 creative acts. For the sanctuary corresponds to the temple where the ark stood with the tablets, which is where the point shines most intensely, which is what brings about the rectification of the breaking of the vessels. Thus, when one is involved in work or business, which are included in the 39 acts, one must do so with great sanctity according to the Torah, so that he will be able to evoke an illumination of the point into his work or business, which will rectify the vessels. All of one's work or business is then in the category of work on the sanctuary, as explained elsewhere, how business and work must be sanctified, so that they are as work on the sanctuary. See Likutey Halakhot, Part 1, 11. But on Shabbat, we cease from all the 39 acts. Even work on the sanctuary was prohibited on Shabbat, for Shabbat is the quintessential point, which is the main rectification of all vessels. That is why there is complete cessation and rest on Shabbat, for the point is then fixed and permanent. In fact, the main rectification of the vessels during the 6 weekdays is through the rest and cessation of Shabbat, through which the point shines into all the 6 weekdays, all of which receive their sustenance from Shabbat, from the point that shines mainly on Shabbat. All of the festival days on which work ceases are closer to and more included in the Shabbat. That is why the festival itself is also called Shabbat, as our sages said. Therefore, we call up more people to the Torah on the festivals in order to illuminate the point into them more intensely through the extra people called up. For the point shines more intensely on the festivals, because it is more in the category of Shabbat, which is why work is prohibited on it. Section 30. And on Yom Kippur we call up even more 6 people. This is because Yom Kippur is even closer to the sanctity of Shabbat than all the other festivals in ultimate proximity, as in, there is no difference between Yom Kippur and Shabbat except Megillah 7a. Hence, there is only a small difference between them, for the point shines very intensely on Yom Kippur, for it is the point of the entire year, as written, one of them is his. Psalms 139:16. Thus, on Yom Kippur, the high priest entered the innermost sanctum to the point of the foundation stone, upon which sat the ark and the tablets, to atone for all sins. That is why we call up 6 people, for 6 corresponds to a line, the line of the full vowel, which is then at its greatest perfection, and when the point receives from Shabbat, this corresponds to the perfection of dot, while chokhmah corresponds to the dot of the full vowel, which is the essence of the point. For as a general rule, everything exists in the collective and in the individual, and every category and rectification includes all others, as the Rebbe said regarding the full vowel being relevant for the collective and for the individual. Thus, though the point shines every single day and in every single human being, nevertheless, the simple person compared to the tzaddik who shines into him is like a line corresponding to the heart, whereas the tzaddik corresponds to the dot, to the point. Similarly, each day compared to a greater day is a line, for the more sacred day is like the point that shines into it. But all the days, including the festival days, are not in the category of complete rectification, not even in the category of the line of the full vowel until they are merged into Yom Kippur, which is one day of the year that includes all other days when sins are forgiven. Though Yom Kippur is the point in comparison to all other days, since its sanctity is so close to that of Shabbat, which is the quintessential point, its sanctity, compared to the sanctity of Shabbat, is like the line of the full vowel that has been completely perfected, so that the light of the point of the Holy Shabbat, which is fixed and permanent, shines into it in great perfection. For though the sanctity of Yom Kippur is very great, and is called the Sabbath of Sabbaths, its sanctity is nevertheless not as fixed and permanent as that of Shabbat. The sanctity of Yom Kippur is dependent upon the Jewish people, that is, the rabbinical courts, to sanctify the new moon, and thus, even on Yom Kippur we recite, "Who sanctified Israel and Yom Kippur, as we do on the other festivals? For the Jewish people sanctify it, as our sages said, Rosh Hashanah 24a. However, Shabbat is completely fixed and permanent, for Shabbat is the quintessential point that comes from God Himself. For Shabbat is God's name." Zohar, Part 2, 88b. Thus, Yom Kippur compared to Shabbat is like the line of the full vowel, while Shabbat corresponds to the point. However, on Yom Kippur the line is more perfected than on all other festival days, and therefore is closer to the point. For when the point, which corresponds to the heart, to the tablets, is more perfected, it is obviously easier to receive the light of the point, which corresponds to the dot, to the 10 Commandments, to the sanctity of Shabbat. Thus, the second tablets were given on Yom Kippur, which is the rectification of the breaking of the original tablets, since the essence of Yom Kippur is to rectify the breaking of the tablets, which is the cause of all sins. On Yom Kippur, the line shines in perfection, which corresponds to the perfection of the tablets, through which we receive the light of the point, corresponding to the 10 Commandments that are engraved on them, so that they endure forever and not fly off again. That is why sins are forgiven on this day, for all disgrace of the heart is dissolved through the light of the point, which is the rectification of everything. Section 31. This is why we read the Torah on Monday and Thursday, for these are the days on which Moses ascended and descended to receive the second tablets that were given on Yom Kippur, for the second tablets are the rectification of the breaking of the vessels. Thus we read the Torah on these days, when he ascended and descended, for the essence of Torah reading is to rectify the breaking of the tablets. Section 32. And this is why the custom is on Simchat Torah, which is Shmini Atzeret, to call up every Jew to the Torah. For on this day we conclude reading the Torah, which is the all-encompassing point that includes all the points that are in each and every Jewish person. The point of each individual Jew relates to his letter in the Torah, which is the root of his soul. Thus, we call up every single person so that his point will shine into him from the Torah that we finish reading on this day. This happens on Shmini Atzeret, which is Simchat Torah, for Shmini Atzeret is the concluding day of all the festivals, and the rectification of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is concluded on Shmini Atzeret as stated in the Kabbalistic texts. This is why this day is called Atzeret, which means a gathering. It gathers and collects all of the rectifications that were accomplished throughout the entire year, especially on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. All this is gathered and collected on Shmini Atzeret, when all the rectifications are concluded. Shmini Atzeret is the conclusion of Sukkot, which is the last festival of the year, and is called the Festival of Gathering, and is at the season of the year around which the entire year revolves, for the rectification of the entire year is encompassed and concluded in it. That is why on this day we conclude the reading the entire Torah and call up every Jew up to the Torah, for the main rectification through the point, which is the totality of the Torah, is concluded on this day. On this day, every single Jewish person receives his point from the Torah, which is shined into the entire Jewish people, as well as each one's point into each other, through which the rectification of the entire year is completed and concluded, for all rectifications come through the point. Thus, there is exceedingly great rejoicing on this day. Since all of the points of the entire Jewish people are shining on this day, they are all shining into each other, and the light is greatly intensified through the merging of the points into each other. This brings about the great rejoicing, for all of the points correspond to the tzaddik, and joy resides with the tzaddik as written. The light of tzaddikim brings joy. Proverbs 13:9. And rejoice tzaddikim in God. Psalms 97:12. And tzaddikim will rejoice and exult there. 68:4. And a light is sown for the tzaddik, and joy for the upright of heart. There. 97:11. Amen and Amen. Section 33. This is the meaning of what our sages said regarding Torah reading. These 3, 5, and 7 people called up to the Torah correspond to the priestly blessing Megillah 23a. The essence of the public Torah reading is in order to evoke and illuminate the holy point where the holy love dwells, through which the breaking of the tablets is rectified, which corresponds to the priestly blessing. This is why we recite the priestly blessing every day immediately after the blessing over the Torah, for the main rectification corresponds to the priestly blessing, which is to arouse the holy love that dwells near the holy point that we evoke through the Torah reading, through which everything is rectified. Laws of the priestly blessing, Law 6, is included in Laws of the Morning Blessings, Law 5.